BarDBarian Apocalypse, a LitRPG adventure. Chapter 11, I'm Alive. Nate let out a groan, his eyes crusting open to see that he was in a dark chamber. It was dimly lit, so he couldn't make out many details. He moaned as he sat up, feeling like dog shit from head to toe. His throat was severely parched, feeling like sandpaper as he swallowed. Rubbing the dried crust from his eyes, he felt around in the darkness, coming to realize that he had been laid down upon a leather couch. Sweat slicked his bare back, realizing he wasn't wearing anything but his boxers. He ran a hand over his face, removing the sweat-caked blanket that had been laid over him. He let out a deep sigh as he swung his legs over the couch, taking a deep breath before peering into the darkness. Everything was still out of focus, details were hard to make out. Was he back in the station? The guys must have been able to bring him back here safely after he passed out. Tom must have fixed him up and got that bad juice out of his system, and thank God for that. Before he could even stand from the couch, he heard footsteps begin approaching from the darkness. He blinked as he looked up at the man who'd appeared from the darkness, seeing that it was one of his co-workers. Nate hadn't learned his name yet, but he'd seen him around the site before, young yet balding, with deeply tanned skin and broad shoulders. He stared at Nate with wide, terrified eyes, shotgun in his hands. He nervously pointed it at him, his hands shaking. The man gulped before showing his friendliest smile. "Hey, Nate, you still with us, or?" Nate frowned at the dumb question. "What do you think, dumbass? Get that fucking gun out of my face." Instead of being insulted, the man let out a sigh of relief and turned to the door and excitedly yelled, "Nate's all right, told you he wouldn't turn." "I betted the same, jackass," a familiar voice barked back. Nate let out a sigh of relief upon seeing Dan approaching the two with a monkey wrench in his hand. "How long was I out?" Nate rasped. "And can I get some water, please?" Dan turned to the guy and slapped him on the back of his head. "You heard the man. Get him some water." Pointing a gun at the man, "Geez. Work me to the bones, why don't you?" grumbled the man as he left the room. "Work me to the bones, why don't you?" Dan mocked him before turning back to Nate. He gave Nate his biggest grin and a pat on the back. "Glad to have you back, man. It's been a rough 3 days without you." 3 days, Nate yelled before falling into a coughing fit. His throat was still as dry as a desert. "Well, you got super poisoned or whatever." Dan shrugged. "Lots of us thought you were going to bite it. You were cold as a freezer, took everything Tom and Clyde had to keep you alive till that poison worked through your system." Speaking of systems. "Status," Nate rasped. "Status, name, Nathan J. Greaves. Class, Barbarian/Bard. Level 2, 1+1. Strength, 16. Constitution, 17, 14 plus 3. Agility, 9. Dexterity, 15. Intelligence, 9. Wisdom, 10. Charisma, 13. Luck, 3. Skills. Guitar play, 7. Bucketmeister, 3. Fisticuffs, 5. Axe, 3. Mace, 2. Abilities, Soothing Songs, 1. Aggravating Tunes, 1. Rage, 2. Resistances, Poison, 1. Looks like his constitution shot up, but more notably, he had apparently gained poison resistance from surviving getting stabbed by Kaylee. The guilt settled back in on his shoulders. Him delaying saving them had resulted in Kaylee's death. Just that few seconds could have been enough for Clyde to have healed her, but no, Nate's stupidity had killed her. His shoulders slumped, eyes falling to the tiled floor. "Hey, I heard what happened to the girl, so don't blame yourself. There's nothing you could have done." Dan tried to comfort him, but Nate shook his head. "If I didn't hesitate, we could have gone there sooner," Nate said, eyes wide as he stared at the floor. Dan scoffed. "By a few seconds. Tom told us everything." He continued, "Sure, you thought of the safer option, and as much as I hated it and wanted to kick your ass for even suggesting it, considering what happened, you were right in the end. Besides, you did the right thing, and it didn't even take a minute before you changed your mind and went to save her." I killed her," Nate muttered, shaking his head. Dan bit his cheek as he contemplated how to respond. "Man, listen," he began after a moment. "She wasn't a person no more, she was a zombie. You didn't kill her," he said with emphasis. "You killed her corpse. It was my responsibility to save her, and I—" Nate began. This fucked up world killed her, dumbass. Dan interrupted. Not you. It's a done deal. So stop moping around and get the fuck up, you pussy. Tom and the others are worried sick about you. With that, Dan left Nate alone in the room. Nate's head hung, clutching it in his hands as he stared at the floor. They, along with the rest of him, had been cleaned in his sleep. Normally he would have been offended, felt violated even, but now he cared more about the fact that he could still smell Kaylee's blood on his hands. If he closed his eyes, he could imagine himself choking the zombified girl, her eyes bursting out of her skull. He was beginning to feel sick. His breathing quickened, eyes going wide as he struggled to get the image of Kaylee's death out of his head. He needed to calm down. He couldn't do this, not right now. He needed something to ease his soul and chase the guilt away. But there were no cigs or booze to be found anywhere in this room. Now that his eyes had adjusted, Nate could see that it was a small office, the couch he sat upon being placed beside the desk. There were a couple buckets sat atop it, along with some rags and other cleaning implements. Looking down, Nate could see a towel had been laid out under him where he'd been sleeping. He grimaced, not wanting to ever find out who it was that had been keeping him clean. Nate would never be able to look that guy in the eyes ever again for as long as he lived. Can't think about it. Need to get her out of my head. He searched around the room for his guitar and spotted it, leaned up against the far wall. He rose from the couch, feeling his skin peel off it and causing him to wince. It felt like duct tape getting torn off. Another day and he might have fused with the damn thing. Nate approached the guitar, grabbing it from the wall with a sigh. A good song. Just like when you're mad, Nate, find a song you love. Try and forget. With a deep breath, he strummed his guitar, attempting to produce a soothing melody. Instead, however, all that came from his guitar was a terrible twang. His ears almost ached to hear the horrible sound. Something here was wrong. Checking his guitar, he could see that it wasn't damaged in any way. So why? Was it his guilt eating at him, preventing him from playing his guitar since a monster like him didn't deserve it? Maybe his guitar had rejected him, and he was stripped of his talent for shredding. Shit was magic now. Maybe his guitar was disgusted by what he had done to Kaylee, or was revolted by his constant tantrums. Nathan shook his head. Before hesitantly, he tried again. He played another chord, and it felt just as awful, the twang causing him to wince. Something was off, either magically or physically, and Nate needed to get to the bottom of it. Upon further inspection, he noticed that there was indeed something off about his guitar axe. He turned his attention to the headstock, and grim realization gave way to burning rage as he ground his teeth. Who the fuck messed with the machine heads? He screamed at the top of his lungs. His dried-up vocal cords stung, but he didn't care. Nate was no amateur. He knew his way around tuning knobs and could fix his strings in a matter of minutes. But that didn't mean he'd accept this. Messing with a man's guitar wasn't just a taboo, it was a sin above all sins. Rage. Veins bulged on his neck as his face turned a deep shade of red. The guilt was still there, but the flames of wrath burned brighter. Despite that, the heat of his rage could never truly swallow the ice-cold guilt in his chest. But it at least helped distract him from thinking about her. He marched out of the dim room and kicked the door open. Everyone that was standing in the hallway turned to him. Their relief turned to fear when they saw his face, teeth bared in a snarl. The guy who had fetched the water trembled, holding the cup in his hands. He took a step back. Look, man, Dan already chewed my ear off. Here's... The man let out a meep when Nate yanked him by his shirt, splashing the cup all over the station's dull blue tiled floor. I don't give two shits about no water. Who did it? Nathan hissed, veins in his neck bulging. What? He asked. Who the hell messed up my guitar? He yelled, face growing red. Chill out, damn it, he thought to himself, but the heat of his anger still had a firm hold on him. He took a deep breath, then another, but before he could fully regain himself on his own, a familiar voice rang out from behind him. I did, the voice called out. Nate released the man, turning around with a glare only for his eyes to widen in surprise. Tom stood there, looking more exhausted than ever. His hair was messy, clothes disheveled, and he had dark mounds for eye bags. Tom let out a weary groan before taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. I thought it would have been a nice gesture, but I guess I messed it up. Sorry, Nate. Nate felt his anger fizzle out and be replaced with a deep sense of shame. Now that he thought about it, it was likely Tom who'd looked after him while Nate was out. At least he'd been healing him while the poison wore off anyhow. And look at what Nate was doing. Instead of thanking the guys for keeping him alive, he was throwing a tantrum like a child. Again. Nate rubbed his neck, trying his best not to look Tom in the eyes. I'm sorry, Tom. And thanks for everything. Tom showed him a gentle smile and patted him on the shoulder. It's fine, but I'm not the one you should apologize to. Tom pointed at the man who Nate held in his grasp a second ago. Nate turned to the man. Sorry, what's your name, bud? Barney, it's fine, yeah. Let bygones be bygones and all that. You'll still need to get your own water after this, Barney said in a joking tone. Fair, Nate told Barney, and with a nod, the guy picked the plastic cup off the floor and left. Good. With that settled, come with me to my office. I left the Amiga there and it's about time for a checkup. You have an office? Did you move into the chief's room? Nate asked. Tom shuddered upon hearing the question. Oh God, no. Since nobody else but me and Sam know how to use the radio, I took the liberty of making the radio room a bit more comfy. Also, it just doesn't feel right to go and sit in Green's place. He trailed off. Nate patted him on the back. If his own head is a mess, he couldn't imagine what Tom would be feeling right now. He saw an old friend of his dead, and he wanted to save Kaylee. And unlike him, Tom didn't just lash out to take out his frustrations, he took on the mantle of leadership, and that meant keeping a clear head. I'm here for you, man. We all are, Nate told his boss, and Tom gave him an appreciative nod. How is she, by the way? Sam? Nate nervously asked. He almost forgot about her. Tom shook his head. She woke up a few hours after you four left, and she's been okay. Green's death was a terrible shock, but she's still coming to terms with what happened, and I feel she's going through a bad case of survivor's guilt. I'm trying my best to help her get over it, but I'm no psychiatrist. Have you asked one of the guys if they can help? Nate asked. Tom shrugged. The closest thing we have to an expert is surprisingly Barney, and he dropped out of a BA in psychology due to some personal reasons. Nate bit his cheek. He was glad that Sam didn't break down after becoming the last survivor of her crew. Nate wouldn't know what to do if such a thing happened to him. Tom then told Nate that his clothes had been cleaned and were sat behind the desk in the room he'd been in, atop a chair. After donning his clothes, which had been patched up by some sloppy needlework, he emerged, following after Tom after getting a drink of water. As he and Tom walked through the station, they kept getting greeted by any co-workers they met, many of which were happy to see Nate back up on his feet. To him, it felt weird seeing so many people check to see if he was okay. He was a dumb idiot dick, yet they still seemed thrilled that he'd woken up. He didn't deserve to be cared about, but seeing how the guys lit up at seeing him up did lift his spirits a bit. Strangely, there were other faces now amongst the original 12 of the construction crew. Men and women he'd never met before, along with some families with children, staring after them as he went. Nate made sure to keep his expression neutral around the kids. He wouldn't forgive himself if he scared any kids. They had to have passed by at least 30 new people in total. Eventually, they reached the doors to the radio room, and Tom pushed them open. Nate couldn't help but whistle upon seeing the inside. He wasn't kidding about turning it into an office. It had changed since the last time Nate saw it. The rows of computers were gone, leaving only 2-3 functioning radios, all buzzing with life, and Tom's Amiga on a large circular desk. On a nearby bulletin board was a physical map of the city with all possible major locations. He found 2 green pins pointing at a supermarket and a hardware store, a purple one pinned down at the northern edge of the map, and 2 white ones pinned above a preschool and a church. Just as he was contemplating what the colors meant, he saw Sam place a red one near a strip mall to the south of Gumshoe. She looked a million times better, the bags gone from beneath her eyes and some color having returned to her skin. She didn't look happy, of course, but that wasn't something that could be held against her. "Heya, Tom Nate," she said, nodding to Nathan. "You had a bad spell for a bit. Glad to see you up." She smiled before turning to point at the map. Tom, once we get rid of the undead surrounding the strip mall, the survivors there should be able to escape. Good work, Tom told her with a smile. What's all this? Nate asked, adjusting his axe sling. Glad to see you up. Likewise, she spared him a smile. Things aren't looking good though, of course. Better, but still bad. They are still holding out on the roof, correct? Tom asked, pointing to the red pin over the strip mall. Tell them to stay put. We'll have someone try to draw the horde away with gunfire in another part of town. Sam gave a nod and went to one of the radios. Nate stood there with his mouth open, his eyes wandering between Tom, Sam, and the map. He eventually settled his gaze on Tom and asked, Are you sure I was asleep for just 3 days? I knew you were a hard worker, but this is nuts. I know, and it wouldn't have been possible without Sam and the guys. Dan and the rest have been doing a Herculean amount of work for the past while, Tom told him with a smile. Sam clicked her tongue and frowned towards Tom. Please stop cutting yourself short, Tom. You set this up, and who knows how many would have died without you. Tom lovingly stroked his Amiga. Well, it's fine to take credit for the healing part, I guess, but I'm sure somebody else would have taken care of the radio. There's a manual after all. Nate rolled his eyes. Oh, please, none of us would have been smart enough to read that thing, and you know it. Coming to the station was also your idea. If any of the other guys were in charge, we'd have gone somewhere stupid. Tom let out a loud yawn before sitting on one of the chairs, rubbing his eyes before taking a deep breath. Pride comes before the fall, Nate. I have to keep myself humble in all things, especially now. The Lord teaches that much. He told him. Nate's eyes fell for an instant as he thought of false witness, before refocusing on Tom. So what did you want to talk to me about? Well, you may not have noticed, but there's a few new faces at the station. Tom explained, while you were out, we got in contact with a few other survivors. Some even managed to make their way here, others are still inbound, and others we've lost contact with. There's a group of 5 trapped atop the strip mall you see on the map there, but they're surrounded by zombies and can't leave. We need to draw them away. I was planning on sending some of the guys out to draw them away from the strip mall. I don't want to ask you to head out so soon, but… No, I'll do it. Let's go now. Nate said quickly, no wasting time. From now on, Nate wasn't going to hesitate to do the right thing, his fist clenched. Never again. Chapter 12. Run to the Hills. The multicolored sky was dark as zombies had surrounded the strip mall. Hours ago, they had caught a whiff of living flesh, of blood as red and pure as wine, and with that, their instincts to render flesh urged them forth. They've honed in on the scent, chasing after and trapping their prey behind the metal gates of a clothing store. 3 of the 5 survivors held the roll-down metal gates shut, while one, a mother, was stabbing at the openings between the gate's grates using an impromptu spear. The spear was a hunting knife lodged and nailed into a metal pole, with duct tape used as an extra measure. The knife's end was covered with a golden glow. With a powerful thrust, thanks to her class's skill, she blew another zombie's head off of its shoulders. The creature's body swayed a bit before it plopped down on the ground and was trampled by the rest of its kin. With bated breaths, she wiped her sweaty brow with her sleeve before taking a worried glance at her injured child. Her son, her pride and joy, was sitting in the far end of the store, knees drawn to his chest as he stared with wide blue eyes at the horde of corpses outside. His blonde hair, a mirror of her own, was matted and ratty from the events of the past week, jaw clenched in terror as the 5-year-old stared on, too shocked to move. You'll be fine, Jamie. Everything will be fine. Her help will be here, she wanted to reassure him, but then she heard the gates creak. When she turned back, she found an abnormally tall zombie with spindly limbs pushing its slim, elongated head through a crack in the gates. Instead of the normal black and red eyes, it had 6 pinkish orbs with goat-like pupils, and they were all staring right at Jamie. Its mouth curled up in a disgusting leer, its teeth sharpened to fine points, almost like an alligator's. She snarled as she wound back her spear. It let out a golden glow as she screamed, "Don't think about touching him, you goddamn freak!" Piercing strike. To her surprise, she felt a sliver of resistance before her spear broke through, only managing to take out 2 of the creature's eyes. The abnormal zombie let out a shrill cry, the force of which sent her flying away from the door. The world was a blur until she impacted with something hard, eliciting a cry of agony from her. Pain shot up her spine, but that was nothing compared to the ringing pain of her ears. She grit her teeth as warm fluid dripped from her ears, her hand coming away bloody when she went to inspect what it was. Her vision was blurry still, her thoughts foggy, pain rocking her body, but Clarissa's physical state didn't matter to her. She tried to stand up, but fell to a single knee instead, an intense wave of nausea coming over her as she tried to make sense of what was going on around her. She could hear nothing, but that was fine. She just needed to let Jess heal her up, and she'd be good as new. Her son wasn't strong enough to save himself. Clarissa needed to protect him, and some damn bursted eardrums wouldn't stop her from doing that. Yet every time she attempted to rise, she fell back to her knees, her world seeming to constantly spin. She wanted to puke, to retch onto the floor, but there was nothing left in her guts. Thankfully, this awful state didn't last long, for Jess came to the rescue. At least the blurry shape generally looked like Jess, the short, petite figure laying hands on Clarissa. She took a sharp breath as she felt her insides pull themselves together, her hearing returning with her equilibrium. Soon Jess came into view, her short dark hair disheveled and matted with dried blood, just like Clarissa herself. Her thick canvas coat was torn in a dozen places, evidence of inflicted injuries that she'd needed to heal herself from. Jess's concerned brown eyes stared into Clarissa's. "We need to go," she said in accented English. "We have to get back to the roof. Escaping this way isn't going to work." Clarissa just nodded, rising to her feet before running to Jamie. "We need to go," she urged, grabbing him by the arm and hoisting him up. "We gotta go now, Jamie," she told him firmly. "Come on," a burly dark-haired man urged, holding the door open that led to the stairwell. "I told you this was a stupid idea." The man, George was his name, shouted from atop the stairwell. He was a rat-faced man, annoying and unbearable beyond belief. Normally she wouldn't have willingly spent a second around a guy like him, but numbers were needed in this new world to survive. Not that he was very useful. Joel and Clarissa were the ones left doing most of the fighting. George only fought if he had to, and had refused to come down from the rooftop to try and thin the horde through the gates. The now four-eyed creature tilted its head as it stared at them, making their escape through the stairwell, its lips curled into a mocking grin. Clarissa could almost hear it cackle as she and Jamie went up the stairs. What followed next was a loud boom and the sound of creaking steel. All sound was drowned by the rushing of feet into the store and the growls of the damned. She heard Joel slam the door shut behind them as she ascended the steps, Jamie held in one arm as she clutched her spear in her free hand. Clarissa carried Jamie and hugged him to her chest with one arm and hastened her pace. She won't let any of the damned freaks harm her baby boy. George shook his head as she passed him, rushing away from the stairwell. "Told ya, idiots, not a good idea." He shook his head. "Now we're fucked," he shouted, free hand clutching at his greasy hair while he held a dented aluminum bat in the other. "Fuck!" he shouted again, stomping on the roof. Clarissa sneered but didn't give the man an answer. She looked around the room for a way up the roof. The damned pests are on their heels. "Help's coming," Joel insisted, locking the second door behind him before bracing against it. "That Tom guy said he'd send a distraction." "Don't count your chickens, man. If it's the same Tom I know, we're screwed." "What would he do? Give the zombies some flowers or bore them to death talking about his computer?" George sneered dismissively. "Don't be an idiot, George," Clarissa snapped. "He has a real plan, unlike you." George rolled his eyes. "Whatever, let's just get out of here already." "Out of here to where exactly?" Jess asked. "We can't jump to the next roof over. They're too far, and the zombies are surrounding." "Who the fuck asked you, Pipsqueak? Go be useful and block the door." George scoffed, shaking his head. "Bar the handle with that bat," Joel urged. "It'll buy us some time." George backed away as he hugged it to his chest. "I'm good, thanks. I ain't letting go of my only weapon." "Are you fucking kidding me?" Joel shouted. "I'm gonna beat your ass if we survive this shit." Boom! The second door shook with a bang. Clarissa took a sharp breath as she saw a handprint on the metal. Joel cursed under his breath before firmly planting his feet on the ground. He turned to a panicking George and screamed, "Hurry up and give me that bat, asshole!" Jamie started weeping as the door banged again, a dent appearing in the upper right-hand corner as a bestial snarl emanated from it. Joel grit his teeth, planting his feet firmly as he strained to keep the door shut. "George," Joel shouted, "bat now!" "Help him," Jess pleaded, "please." George nervously looked between the two and slowly backed away. Before anyone could do anything to stop him, he ran to the far edge of the roof, not looking back as he ran. "George," Joel shouted. Before anything else could be said, a loud gunshot could be heard, echoing from a distance. Much to her relief, the moans from the streets began heading toward the source of the noise. She could see the muzzle flash in the distance, Tom's guys, but those wouldn't draw away the zombies in the stairwell. Still, though, this was a golden opportunity. They just needed to climb down from the roof. Then they would be able to escape. "Joel, come on," Clarissa yelled, urging him to follow her. "Down the roof." For once, George did something useful, albeit as a byproduct of his cowardice rather than anything altruistic. Once the zombies in the streets were distracted, he hugged on a drain pipe and quickly slid below, leaving all of them behind. They'd need to follow that rat to survive, but after this, Clarissa would have nothing more to do with him. He was trash and actively was a burden to their group, and she was sure that Joel would agree. She ran toward the pipe quickly, but stopped before attempting her descent. She turned to Joel, who was rushing toward them before yelling, "Joel, give me your belt." "What?" the man asked, eyes widening for a second before he turned to Jamie. "One belt won't hold him." "It's better than nothing, please," Clarissa pleaded. Joel undid his broad leather belt, handing it to her right as another few dents formed in the stairwell's door. "Quickly," Joel urged. "I'll go down last. Hurry." Clarissa gave him an appreciative nod before turning to Jamie. "Sweetie, you just need to hang on, like a piggyback ride, okay?" Jamie just nodded as she adjusted him, his arms wrapped around her neck. She hesitated for a second, but threw her spear below, hoping it wouldn't land on a wrong angle and snap upon impact. She took a deep breath and prayed to God that this would work. She tied the belt around her torso, her son harnessed on her back and holding her tightly. Clarissa then lowered herself from the gutter, her amplified strength put to good use as she gripped it tightly. The fighter class had its perks, though she'd never thought of herself as being such a type before all this happened. Things worked out just as planned, thank God, reaching the ground without a hitch. Jamie kept his face buried in the nape of her neck, silently sobbing as she grabbed her thankfully still intact spear and darted across the street, away from the strip mall. She heard Jess and Joel make their landings behind her, following her lead as they ran for the houses across the street. Gumshoe wasn't that far from here, they just needed to make it there in one piece. A short chain-link fence sat before her, a half-ruined house sitting behind it. Surviving zombies meant forcing them to cross difficult obstacles, and most of them wouldn't be smart enough to simply leap the chest-high fence. Just as she jumped over the fence, she saw something blur toward her from the corner of her eye. Parry. She could only block the attack on instinct, but all that did was save her from outright death, not damage. Her spear broke in two, hearing a distinct crunch from her arm as it absorbed the shock of the blow. Clarissa let out a cry of agony as her shattered arm was knocked backward, leaving her off balance. She fell to her rear with wide eyes, and despite the pain, she glanced back at Jamie, relieved to see that he was all right, still clutching to her back, eyes squeezed shut. She then turned to glare at the attacker, seeing that it was the same mutated zombie from earlier, and she could see the mirth in its two remaining eyes. It reared back its head before letting out a snot-filled laugh. Clarissa scrambled backward as the creature's wide mouth snapped toward her. Its open maw collided with the ground, biting up dirt instead of flesh. As it raised its head, Joel rushed past her before launching a flying knee right in its face. The abomination barely reacted to the blow, but Joel didn't relent, following up with a brutal combo of strikes with his bare fists, aiming at its neck and joints. It rose to its full height, towering over Joel by a full foot, not reacting to the flurry of blows. Joel snarled as he launched a roundhouse kick, it finally eliciting a reaction from the beast as Joel's heel slammed into its throat. It let out a cough before taking a step back, hand clutching its neck as Joel pressed his assault. Jess knelt by her side, and her hands began to glow. Clarissa felt a wave of relief wash all over her, mending her arm and taking care of her fatigue. "Thanks, Jess," she told the petite girl as she gently grabbed Jamie's shaking hand. His whole body was trembling, terror clear in the young boy's teary eyes. Jess gave him a smile. "I've got you always." Clarissa looked between her and Joel. It looked as if Joel was holding his own against the beast, but she could see that he was getting tired and slowly losing ground. The zombie was no longer backing away, but retaliating with claws and bites aimed for Joel. Joel may have been faster, but not by much, only just barely avoiding the beast's blows and receiving glancing injuries as they continued to battle. There were multiple nicks and shallow lacerations through Joel's clothes, soaking the cloth around the wounds red. Clarissa unbuckled the belt and placed Jamie on the ground. Her heart winced when Jamie hugged her leg with tears in his eyes. "Please don't go," he cried, his shoulders shaking with every sob. Clarissa brushed his hair and told him, "Nothing will happen, okay? Mommy needs you to be brave so she can help Uncle Joel to beat back that nasty monster. Stay with Jess and then we'll go get out of here." Really?" he whimpered. "Really," she reassured him before grabbing a knife from her belt. While she got more used to the spear, her fighter class helped her with all weapons. Joel even gave her lessons just in case. She waited for the right opportunity. Just when Joel narrowly avoided the creature's attack and it overextended itself, Clarissa rushed in, eyes going wide as she closed the distance between herself and the monster. Her arm blurred forward, moving at a speed too fast for the zombie to react to. Quick strike. Double attack. Quick strike made her attack faster than the eye could track, and double attack would allow her to strike the same target twice almost instantaneously. Combining these abilities together, she managed to slash through two of its eyeballs on the left side. The lanky abomination screeched in fury as it swung its long arm in retaliation, but Clarissa was able to avoid it by ducking down, hearing it rush over her head like a passing car. Joel used that opportunity to give it a strike right above the stomach, launching his heel into it hard. It was pushed back, sliding across the grass, hand clutching its abdomen as it retched, its face a grimace of pain. How hitting it in the liver could cause the zombie pain, she didn't know, but this thing was clearly different from the bog-standard undead. Maybe it wasn't even a zombie, not anymore anyhow. As the fight continued, she grinned. She felt herself reaching an all-time high with every stab she managed to inflict on the monster. This wasn't the first time she felt this way and hated how much she enjoyed it. Being in such danger was a thrill she'd never experienced before, and it was a sensation that she had grown to relish. She almost wanted to take her time fighting the creature, but thought better of it. Her emotions hadn't been the same ever since gaining her class, seeming to funnel her into behaving a certain way. She needed to remain in control and end this now. The creature snarled at them, hesitating before launching back into the fray, giving her and Joel some breathing room as it dripped with black blood. The eyes on the left side of its face were all shut, useless and seeping. She forced the grin off her face as she gave Joel a quick glance. He gave her a quick nod, his calloused fists raised. "It's time to finish this." The two then burst forth and flanked the creature's sides, avoiding its maw as it snapped at them, remaining eyes going wide with fear. Clarissa aimed a strike at its neck from its blind spot, but before she could, her eyes widened when a hole appeared on the left side of its chest, opening like a toothless mouth. She felt her vision blur as she was sent flying away by a large boom. Consciousness faded after she impacted with the ground, and when it returned, she knew not how much time had passed. What happened? She asked herself as her vision came to. She tried to stand up, only to fall back on all fours, her vision tunneling and head aching. Her limbs felt leaden as she tried to will herself to rise. Falling back down again, she instead looked over to see Jamie staring up at the zombie, lower lip trembling in terror. Both Joel and Jess were lying in puddles of their own blood, the creature standing over Jamie with drool dripping down its chin. "No!" she screamed as she finally managed to scramble to her feet. She unsteadily walked towards her son, her precious boy, stumbling over every few steps. The mutated zombie laughed at her feeble attempts and raised Jamie high into the air. Her heart sank when its maw unhinged a long, spiky tongue extending toward the boy. Right then she heard a guitar riff, awfully tuned and strangely drawing irritation from her despite the horror of this situation. She found her annoyance budding, but it was nothing compared to what the zombie apparently felt. It let out an infuriated snarl, a grimace of rage on its face. It dropped Jamie roughly to the ground, whirling to face the source of the noise. Clarissa, too, risked a glance back, curiosity overcoming her terror for a brief instant. Standing there was a man with long black hair, holding a guitar shaped like an axe. Or was it an axe shaped like a guitar? She didn't know. He was massive, with a scary face and even more terrifying glare. Thankfully, those wide, angry eyes weren't directed at her, but the monster before him. The mutant lunged towards him, a now noticeable bulge under its chin. "Watch out, it's gonna—" The man didn't need her warning. He quickly ran to the zombie, and once he was in its range, he ducked at the last second, avoiding the blast of compressed energy. As the zombie stumbled within reach, he swung his guitar axe with a roar, the blade slicing into the monster's neck, before separating the head from its body, the stump geysering with black blood. Clarissa could see the shock in the creature's eyes as its head tumbled through the air. Once it hit the ground, its remaining eye twitched before the black-haired man obliterated its skull with one stomp. Silence filled the air as he turned to Jamie and knelt beside the shivering boy with a smile on his face. "Everything will be fine. Tom sent us," she heard someone tell her. She then felt the now familiar warmth of healing, a glow emanating from her body as her wounds began to heal. When she turned to see who'd done it, she was shocked to see that it was a large, bald man, shoulders as wide as a doorframe with heavily calloused hands. "No, wait, Joel and Jess need help. Please don't let them die," she cried. The man gave her a firm nod. "I won't let them die, but first we need to tend to you." "I can't let the kid watch his mom die," he told her. He turned to the black-haired man and yelled, "Hey, Nate, can you please bring those two over?" The man, Nate, placed Jamie on his shoulder and gave him a thumbs up. "Will do, man." That was all Clarissa needed to hear. She let out a sigh of relief and felt warm tears running down her cheeks. "We're saved. Thank you, God. Thank you." Chapter 13. War Pigs. Nate let out a sigh of relief once the police station's metal gate slid down over the shattered glass doors. The little blonde boy, Jamie, clung to his mother's back again, followed by the burly dark-haired man, Joel, and the short Hispanic woman, Jess. They had been in rough shape fighting that mutant zombie thing, but Nate had been able to make short work of it. Apparently, Clarissa, Jamie's mother, was a fighter, Joel a monk, and Jess a healer like Tom. They had been grateful for the assist, saying one of their own had abandoned them to die on that rooftop. It was a good thing Nate and Clyde had decided to come that way, just in case the zombies didn't leave as planned. Now they had 4 more survivors at the station, and thank God for that. Nate didn't want to be responsible for their deaths as well, especially not little Jamie. The kid was shell-shocked, not responding to anything his mother or the others said. Nate didn't even try to get the kid's attention. He had gone through enough trouble today already. Last thing Jamie wanted was to get told it'd all be all right, by a stranger. It'd be up to his mum for that. The reception area was being watched over by many members of the crew now, an eye on each window and door at all times of the day. There were even some familiar faces in the crowd, more of their co-workers that had left the site early to find their families. Some of them apparently had, others not so much. Those men wore grim expressions on their faces, their eyes near lifeless as they bore holes through the doors with their dead stares. Nate wasn't sure how to comfort them guys either. He had no idea the kind of pain they were going through. But like Jamie, the last thing they needed was Nate trying to comfort them. A dozen couches and chairs had been arranged around the lobby, several people sitting down atop them, various weapons within arm's reach, from sturdy steel tools to loaded guns. The station had become the place to be for human survivors. It still baffled him how many people had managed to make their way here while Nate was unconscious. He saw Tom come down the stairs as Nate and the newcomers approached, holding a bunch of blankets with a soft smile on his face. Following behind him were Dan and Barney, holding other supplies the new survivors might need, water bottles, granola bars, the works. As Tom was about to welcome the survivors, Dan cut him off with a joke. "Welcome to paradise," he said with a smile. It didn't last long, and his expression turned to worry when he noticed the state of the kid. Jamie backtracked a bit and hid behind his mom when the tattooed man tried approaching him. Dan raised his hands and took a step back. "Don't worry, kid. The bad times are over." Dan smiled again, the boy retreating further. You're scaring him with that ugly mug of yours, Nate grumbled. Them tats ain't helping neither. You always got some crap to say, Dan corrected quickly, locking eyes with Clarissa for an instant. Sorry, bad habits. The blonde woman just smiled. It's all right. Cursing's not the worst thing to be worried about these days. Ain't that the Dan bit his cheek. Ain't that the truth? Welcome to the station. Tom smiled. Don't mind them. They're rough and tumble, but they're good folk. We have power and running water here. Just make yourselves at home. Clarissa nodded, jumping when they all heard a rattling at the door. Nate turned, eyes widening as he saw the rat boy George standing there, huffing and puffing. Nate, buddy, he waved. Can you let me in, please? He didn't like the guy, but George would die out there if they didn't let him in. He lifted the gate, allowing the rat to scuttle inside before shutting it once again. Can't believe you're alive, Nate told him. Me neither. Dan grumbled, glaring right at George. George visibly swallowed under Dan's glare. Hey man, things are all good, you know? Dan didn't reply. Piece of shit. He heard Joel grumble, slamming a fist into his palm. That's the guy that left us for dead. Tom gasped. Is that true? Nate turned to glare at George, who raised his hand defensively. No, Tom, that ain't what happened, he said in a tone that could almost pass as sincere. Things got bad and we were separated. I led the way and showed him where to go. Bullshit, Joel pointed. He left us for dead. I asked him for that bat to help bar the door to buy you guys time, and he just skittered away like a bug. George just shook his head. This guy's lying, Tom, trust me. He's been a problem ever since we met up. He's just putting the blame on me for his mistakes. Joel marched toward George, fist already rearing back. Nate stepped between them, Joel hesitating as he stared up at Nate. You don't buy that shit, do you? Joel shouted. Of course not, Nate told him before twisting and launching a fist right into George's jaw. The man's head whipped to the side, falling to the floor in a daze, blood spilling from his mouth. I just wanted to be the one to clobber him, Nate snarled. George, you piece of shit, you left a kid to die? He asked, looming over the smaller man. Nate, come on, buddy. He raised his hands. That ain't the whole story, you weren't there. He did what? Dan shouted. Get ready for a beatdown, you little punk, Dan snarled. George panicked when Dan began stomping toward him, face growing red, lips pulled back to reveal a tooth-filled snarl. Nate had no intent on getting in Dan's way, but that sentiment wasn't shared by Tom, who rushed into Dan's path. That's enough, you two, Tom told a fuming Dan. Are you kidding me, Tom? Dan questioned, gesturing to Clarissa, who was now clutching her son tightly. You heard what he did. Tom shook his head. I'm sorry, but we can't just play the part of judge, jury, and executioner whenever we feel like it. There aren't that many people left in the world, for all we know. We don't need to add to the body count. Dan glared at the older man, but Tom refused to back down. He just stood there, arms crossed as he stared right back at Dan, unflinching. Tom, you lovable angel of a man, you. I knew you'd have my back, George said with a smile, wiping the blood from his mouth. Tom then turned back to George with a frown. I'm not having your back. There are kids and people in distress here, and I'm not going to traumatize them further by having a grown man beaten to a bloody pulp in front of their eyes. People need a safe haven now more than ever, and I'll make sure it's this station. Do I make myself clear? When Nate turned to check how Jamie's mother felt about this, he could almost see her eyes glowing red with rage, justifiably so. I fucking hope Tom knows what he's doing, Nate prayed. George had always abused Tom's innate kindness to escape from any sticky situations he found himself in. You're not getting out of this easy, George. Not this time. Dan pointed at him. What? Come on, man. I made a mistake and I feel terribly sorry about it. How can I make it up? I'll be better for you guys, really, George insisted, standing from the tiled floor. Tom scoffed. You're apologizing to the wrong guy. Or girl, I should say, Tom said, pointing to Clarissa and Jamie. George's smile faded as he saw them, Jamie refusing to look George in the eye, whilst Clarissa seemed to be growing more furious by the second, her face nearly matching Dan's in hue and countenance. The sight of Clarissa's clear rage must have stunned George somehow, for the man's mouth worked but no words came out. Well, he finally managed before lapsing into silence again. You felt sorry, didn't you? Tom sternly asked him. Well, yeah, but you see, Tom smiled. Then I'm sure covering Clarissa's share around here would help ease your conscience. The kid's too young, and he needs his mom by his side, so you'll need to work extra hard to make sure they don't need anything. That should make up for what you did, and then some. George's eyes widened. Come on, Tom, you're breaking my balls. George complained, I almost died out there, I ain't going back out again. Tom shook his head before letting out a sigh. Actions have consequences, George, and even if you didn't leave them behind, we would still need you to pull your weight around here. We can't afford to just have you lay around and do nothing, sucking up all the food. George gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to raise his finger at Tom, he heard someone cracking his knuckles. It was Dan, and he had a shit-eating grin on his face. George, by all means, continue. Go ahead and tell Tom how useless you plan on being. I'm sure he wouldn't stop me from kicking your ass out of here after that. Of course he won't. Who knows what might happen if he did, Nate added with a grin of his own. George's eyes nervously switched between the two, and his shoulders slumped in defeat. Fine. Fine what? Nate asked. I'll cover her shifts so she can stay with her son. George forced every syllable out of his mouth, and now even Joel was having fun at the man's expense, a satisfied grin on his face. Tom gave a nod before turning to Clarissa. Well, miss, hope this is satisfactory for now. Clarissa gave a nod. It's not perfect, but it'd work. Thank you, Tom. Same here. Nate glared at George, crossing his large arms. But... George stumbled. I'm sorry, Clarissa, I was just scared is all. He continued, looking to the blonde woman. She let out a scoff, turning her head to look instead at Tom. Is there anywhere in here we can lay down? Tom nodded. There sure is. We cleared out the break room a couple days ago, filled it up with couches, chairs, even some mattresses we scavenged from town. The beds aren't pretty, but they'll still work. Go and get some rest. We'll talk again in a while, all right? Tom asked. And it's nice to meet you, young man. It's all going to be okay now. Tom smiled at Jamie. I'll see if I can't ask some of the guys to find you some toys to play with on their next supply run. Jamie looked away, hugging his mother's leg tightly. Tom just smiled, turning to look at Nate. Glad you boys got them out of there. Good work. Nate gave a grim smile. Glad I did something right for a change. He said, shooting a glance at the 4 survivors, just wish I could have gotten... Nate, for the last time, man, Dan began. A couple seconds, it wasn't your fault. Nate didn't reply. Deep down he knew that Dan was right, but it was more the fact that he had been willing to leave them for dead in the first place that gnawed at his soul at this point. Clyde ushered the 4 new survivors out of the lobby, leaving George behind with the rest of the guys. Another day, another dollar, George grinned nervously. Right, guys? Eat shit, George. Nate scowled. You cause trouble around here, and you'll get your ass beat. By me, Dan, who knows who else. Tom then sighed. I do wish you boys would try and put your differences aside. We are living in an apocalypse. We need to come together to get through this. He then stared at George, meaning that you need to contribute, George. If you can't pull your weight, then you may have to take your leave and find somewhere else to hide out. George looked as taken aback as Nate felt. Tom was willing to kick him out to the streets. It could just be a scare tactic, meant to ensure that George would actually work, either here in the station or out in the streets gathering supplies. For now, though, George, go and get some rest. Tom told him, I'll find something for you to do tomorrow. Ben, if you would. Tom asked, show him to the break room. Ben grumbled, shooting George a glare. Come on, shit lips, he scowled. Missed you, bud, George declared happily, approaching Ben with a hand raised. Ben didn't return the high five as he turned away from George, leading the rat-faced douche down the same corridor the others had left from. Tom then turned to Nate with a sigh, the heavy dark bags under his blue eyes seeming to weigh his whole head down as it slumped slightly. You should go get some rest, Tom, Nate told him. You look like shit. Tom chuckled, forward as always. He yawned. I do plan on it, but first I wanted to ask you, what's your level? Last I checked, I was level 2, and that was at the start of all this. Nate told him. I see. While you were unconscious, we all gained a level. Most here are level 2, same as you, but I've managed to reach level 3. Tom told him. Not from killing anything, mind you. I believe I get closer to leveling up based on how much healing I provide. But I also noticed that there are ways to advance more quickly. Check your quests tab and see what it wants you to do. You want me to play into news bullshit? Nate asked, narrowing his eyes. If it makes you strong enough to take on what's out there, then yes. Tom nodded. I finished a side quest to heal people over 50 times in a single day, which I did. That's what got me to level 3, and let me tell you, the results are staggering. Tom said, healing isn't as hard anymore, and I have 2 new skills. I can apparently now detect when something is magical, like that axe of yours, he said, pointing to Nate's guitar, and I can cure disease if you can believe it. Not sure what the limits on it are, but what if I can cure diabetes or the like? Wouldn't that be something? You got Jesus powers? Nate asked, eyes wide. Tom frowned, shaking his head. Don't compare me to him. I wouldn't dare try to claim as much. Wonder if he can cure cancer. Dan rubbed his chin. It's probably just stuff like the flu. Tom shrugged. I haven't had the opportunity to test it out yet. I might ask our new arrivals if they have any illnesses I can test this out on. But back to you, Nate. You started out as level 2, and I think I know the reason for that. Is it because I'm dual class? He asked. Tom gave a smile. Exactly what I was thinking. You are level 1 in both classes. So I believe that you have potential to be the strongest of us here, as you level up anyhow. New left us another gift, a video explaining a few things, and thanks to that, I found out that the cap is level 20, so maybe your cap is different. You saying he could be level 40? Dan asked, eyebrows lifting as he let out a whistle. Technically, yes, Tom answered. He has 2 separate caps for the 2 classes he has. 20 for Barbarian, 20 for Bard. I suspect he might have difficulty progressing, though, compared with everyone else that is. Nate suddenly felt pride fill him before he stuffed it down. He didn't want to get a big head about all this. Instead, he asked, so why do you think I'll have a harder time? Well, it's not that I think you will, Tom explained, but I'm wondering if you'll need to get twice the experience as someone else in order to advance. What if you can't level up until you reach the X requirements for both? If not, you could end up being a level 3 barbarian and stay a level 1 bard, and vice versa. You being dual class means we don't understand how your advancement works, which is why I was hoping you could fulfill some of your side quests so you can level up. That way you'll be both far stronger, and we'll get an understanding about how your particular system functions. Nate nodded. All right then, I'm game. Quests, side quests, Nate said, the screen popping up at the top of his vision. Side quests. Entertain over 100 people with soothing songs tunes. Reward, Simps Exper, kill 25 goblins solo. Reward, 100 experience points, kill 25 standard zombies solo. Reward, 50 experience points. Explore the Elven Forest. Reward, 250 experience points. Kill a wood spawn. Reward, Simps XP. Sway an elf with music. Reward, Simps XP. Discover a rune of power. Reward, Simps XP greater than encounter and survive an entity more than 5 levels higher than you. Reward, 500 experience points. Breach the Spire, 1000 experience. Damn, Breach the Spire will gimme 1000 XP. Nate said, any of you guys have that one? I do. Dan nodded. Tom keeps telling me it's too dangerous, though, at least to go alone. He smiled at Nate. But you got the same quest. Far as I know, it's just you and me that have it. How much will that level us up? Nate asked him. Dan shrugged. No clue, but it's a pretty big number. Dan, weren't you listening to me yesterday? Tom asked him. Say exp to next level. I was half asleep, he replied sheepishly. Sorry. Exp to next. Nate wasn't able to finish his sentence before he heard something growling. He turned his head to the windows, a deep frown on his face. What's wrong, Nate? Tom asked him. Can't you hear it? Nate told them, hand reaching for his guitar axe. It wasn't growling, no. That was the sound of engines revving, and it was getting closer, audible through the shattered glass doors. Dan snorted, I hear no shit, you paranoid baby. It was then that the revving grew far louder, sounding like it was almost over the police station, above their heads. All 3 men approached the windows, peering outside to try and find the source of the noise. Nate looked up toward the source of the revving, jaw dropping slightly as he stared at what hovered above the street. Dan rubbed his eyes. "Are you two seeing what I'm seeing?" Nate slowly gave a nod. "This is such bullshit," he mouthed. They saw about 20 motorcycles flying in the air, all ridden by men wearing black bandanas and steel-studded leather coats. On the bandanas, the motorcycles, and their arms was the image of a fat bearded boar with orange flames coming out of its mouth, underlighting its dark sunglasses. Nate shifted focus as he heard groaning in the distance, coming from the streets beyond the revving. Nate looked away from the skybikers to see a tide of the dead, heading down the rubble-strewn road towards the police station. There had to be 100, maybe even 200 of them coming, with gnashing teeth and swiping claws. "Shit, these fuckers are attracting them zombies," Dan cursed. "Dan, go let everyone know there's a horde coming and to get armed." Tom shouted, "Everyone else here in the lobby, get ready to fight." Nate unslung his guitar axe before he pointed at the flying bikers. "What are we going to do about them?" Before Tom could respond, a ball of fire was forming above one of the bikers. The others gave distance to a burly, shirtless man with shoulder-length brown hair, a handlebar mustache, and wearing aviator sunglasses. He was slouched back on the bike's seat, arms behind his head, while his feet lying on the steering wheel. Tom and Nate stood speechless as the ball of fire grew to ridiculous proportions. Nate could feel its heat on his skin even from here. Even more shocking, Nate could have sworn that he saw some zombies in the horde hesitate before they resumed their march to the police station. "The fuck is happening?" Dan asked the two, his face lit orange by the fireball above. Ben was beside him, approaching the window alongside Dan as the two men looked up at the sky. The two's jaws almost hit the floor on seeing the big ball of fire outside of the station. Other people poured into the lobby, mostly men armed with various guns. Their mouths hung open when they peered outside the window, hands trembling. The biker with the handlebar mustache then cracked his knuckles before he stood up on his bike. With a vainglorious grin, he raised his index finger to the sky. The miniature sun then began to spin, the flaming surface roiling. "Fall," he commanded in a deep voice that echoed through the glass, flicking his finger forward. The fireball then launched itself toward the crowd of zombies below, lighting everything it passed in orange light as it sped toward the undead, the man crossing his arms as he stared after the fireball. "Take cover," Tom yelled as he ducked underneath the window. Nate ducked down as well, teeth clenched as he braced himself. The world seemed to shake as the fireball made impact with the horde. The wall he braced under, feeling suddenly warm to the touch. Once the shaking ceased and the wall cooled to the touch, Nate risked a peek over the edge of the window. A chill went down Nate's spine upon seeing the destructive hellscape before him. The zombies were vaporized to ash, and so was the rest of the street he could see. None of the greenery survived, and the sidewalks, streets, and the cars were molten orange and bubbling. A deep crater in the asphalt lay in the center of the chaos, practically glowing white. "How the hell are we going to fight that?" Ben muttered aloud. Nate would have expected Dan to mock him, but the man stood silent as he stared at the destruction before them. Nate then heard a whistle coming from above. Clearly proud of his display, the biker laughed as he theatrically raised his arms in the sky. "You've seen the limit of my power. Now kneel before your new god, war hog, you measly pigs." He yelled while puffing his chest out, fists on his hips. Some of the other bikers groaned, face-palmed, or shook their heads. Nate couldn't help but agree. Despite the power on display, he couldn't help but cringe at how lame that little speech was. "Hey, what the heck, man?" Nate grumbled as Dan nudged him out of the way. "Wait, I think I've seen that shitty act before," Dan muttered as he squinted his eyes. Slowly, any fear he had left his eyes, and in its place was a mischievous light. "Jeremy, is that you?" The biker shuddered at hearing Dan's voice. He dropped the omnipotent act and slowly lowered his head until he stared the tattooed man in the eyes. "Fuck." The biker muttered, "Fuck." He then shouted, frustrated as he glared at Dan. And with that, whatever grandeur this man had built up with his magical display had gone with the wind. Nate wasn't sure if Jeremy could hear Dan through the windows, but he seemed to recognize him. And he was clearly displeased to see the shit-eating grin on the tattooed man's face. Chapter 14. Fly Away. Jeremy, Dan waved, approaching the door. Cheesy bastard, the hell you doing? He asked with a laugh. Jeremy scowled. Don't call me that, Dan. Jeremy pointed, or I'll blast your little pigsty to ruins. Dan shot Nate a strange look, widening his eyes and curling out his lips as if to say, oh, look out for this guy. It was clear that Dan didn't think highly of this Jeremy dude. What he was more concerned about was the fact that he'd just threatened to blow up the station. Nate had seen firsthand just how powerful this biker dude could be. If he wanted to obliterate the station, he very well could if he desired it. Yet here Dan was, treating this flying freak as if he were just some punk kid. What gave Dan such confidence? Sure thing, pussy, Dan pointed. I know them spells got limits, you just wanted to put on a show. Betcha don't even got another one in the tank, do ya? The other bikers looked to Jeremy, who stiffened at Dan's words, gritting his teeth. I do, Jeremy shouted. Don't test me, Danny. I have reached levels of power that you can hardly comprehend. Oh, all right, big guy, Dan shouted in mock alarm, raising his hands. Face it, bud. Once a theater kid, always a theater kid. Don't matter how much leather and studs you put on, or how many fireballs you sling around here, you'll always be a dweeb. Jeremy snarled and Nate's eyes widened. You trying to get us killed? Nate scowled. Didn't you see what that guy just did? Dan shook his head, waving Nate off dismissively. Trust me, man, I got this. Go fuck yourself. Your brother was a damn theater kid too, Jeremy shouted down at Dan. Dan crossed his arms, that obnoxious smirk still on his face. Oh yeah, unlike you, he had talent. How many shows have you been in, huh? Jeremy took a sharp breath. He raised a finger and opened his mouth, but he couldn't come with an argument. What's wrong, little bro? Still mad about getting cast as the tree? Dan laughed, wiping an imaginary tear from his eye. You're a fucking loser, dude. Dan, shut your mouth, Tom urged, grabbing him by the shoulder. Dan just shook his head. Trust me here, this is the best way to deal with this guy. Nate gulped once he saw Jeremy turn a shade of red. The man turned to his companions and yelled, beat him up. He pointed to Dan. Get his ass. Dan put a hand to his mouth and gasped. Why, weren't you going to burn me with your fancy pants magic? Jeremy froze, a grimace of shock on his face. You what? Dan asked, crossing his arms. You gonna keep acting like a dick, or are you gonna come talk to me like a man? The other bikers then turned to stare at Jeremy again, seeming to be expectant. Didn't I tell you to beat his ass? Do you want me to drop those bikes down? He screamed. That ain't what we're here for, Jerry. One of the bikers said, Boss will get mad if we start beating folks, just go talk to 'em. Yeah, don't be a pussy. Another chuckled. By the way, what was that about you being a theater kid? Jeremy's shoulders slumped. I can't believe you guys. That's what you care about. Larry, you used to do ballet lessons for Christ's sake. Ballet is for real men, Larry replied. Theater is for fairies. Jeremy's eyebrows shot up. You did not just say that, Mr. Tutu. Jerry boy, Dan called, getting Jeremy's attention. Your boys are going to think you're a bitch. Jeremy threw his hands in the air. Fine, you want me to come down there? I'm going to make you regret it. Jeremy grumbled under his breath as his motorcycle descended from the air, floating to land near the station's gates. Once the bike landed, he got off of his bike and yelled at the door. Happy now, dumbass? Come and face me like a man. Nate goggled at the display as Dan emerged from the station with a grin. Fucking nerd asshole. He laughed, shaking his head. What the hell? Ben stared as Jeremy and Dan approached one another, the latter puffing out his chest and jutting out his chin while Dan seemed nonchalant. How's your mum, by the way? Is she asking about me? Dan said mockingly. You got to tell her to stop texting me so much. She's so needy. And how's your dog? Is your bro still feeding it peanut butter off of his nads? Jeremy countered in a heated tone. Surprisingly, Dan just laughed. All these years and that's the best you can come up with? Well, shut up. Some of us weren't clowns. Dan laughed again. You were a fucking theater kid. You're the definition of a clown. You still watching them Chinese cartoons? You sure talk like you're in one, nerd ass. They're Japanese, asshole, and you're one to talk. Did you tell your friends about them magical girls? Jeremy pointed to Nate and the others by the doors. That was a cartoon. Dan shrugged. Watched it with my ex, so what? You watch that stuff on your own. Well, excuse me for being true to myself, and for the record, everyone watches it nowadays. Jeremy huffed, crossing his arms. All right, that's enough, Tom yelled, shaking his head as he emerged from the station. Look, let's just get to the point. What is it that you want? Nate emerged as well, eyeing the bikers warily as he went. He'd rather have just stayed in the station. These guys were all armed and they had the high ground, air. He couldn't just let Tom walk out without protection either. Nate looked up at the roof, relieved to see a glint coming from near one of the air conditioners. Someone here had a gun aimed at the bikers. Let's hope it's not Kevin. He prayed. Jeremy then gave a grin before stretching his arms out wide. We've come to offer you a chance to join our crew. We're going to rebuild this world one city at a time, and with our might we shall… Dan then snickered. Jeremy's jaw clenched. We shall bring a new era into this. Dan snickered again, a vein popping on Jeremy's temple. What's so funny, donkey breath? You'd think after all these years you'd discover toothpaste, but nope. You're so fucking corny, bro. We graduated like 12 years ago or some shit, and you still talk like this is an anime. Jeremy then pointed to Dan. Aha, you do know what they're called. Of course I know what they're called, dumbass. It's 2025. It's just funny seeing you get your panties in a twist. Back to the topic at hand, please. And Dan, please behave yourself. Tom sighed. You want us to join up with you? Is that right? There needs to be order in the world, and we're the best bet Idaho has. Food, water, and medical supplies. We have a lot of benefits to offer for those who join us. Jeremy grinned, putting his eerily white teeth on display. And what about those who don't? Jeremy shrugged. No one's been dumb enough to say no yet. Tom glared. Is that a threat? He asked. It's just what I said. You'll probably be fine on your own. Hell, the boss might be all right with just letting you live out your little lives here in peace, provided you pay us protection. Food, guns, ammo, give us a cut of whatever you got, 60%, and we'll keep you all safe from the terrors of this new world. Jeremy stretched out his arms again. What do you think? That's hypocritical. Weren't bikers supposed to be about freedom? Ben complained. Hypocritical or not, it's fair. We provide you safety at our own risk, and you just need to pay us. Let's be honest, we'd still be doing better work than what your tax money was spent on before. 60%. Dan snorted. We don't need your help, dicknose. How about you piss off back to Mommy's basement already? 60% is too much. Tom interrupted before Jeremy could counter. Listen, we're trying to scrape together what we can right now, and we don't have much. Nate stared at Tom in surprise. Wait, you're considering their offer? He asked. Sorry, not my call, and it's not up to debate. Our boss isn't the type that likes to haggle. Take it or leave it. Jeremy shrugged. We need some time to discuss it. It is a potentially life-changing decision, after all. Jeremy frowned. Look, sir, I can't exactly give you a lot of time. 'Cause you're a lackey, Dan countered. Jeremy gave him a silent glare before turning his attention back to Tom. As much as I hate it, Dick Breath isn't wrong. I'm a newly appointed captain, courtesy of being a wizard and a high-level one at that, but that doesn't give me much leeway to act how I want. I need to report back your decision before nightfall. Sorry, mister. Tom sighed. Tom, name's Tom. It won't take long. It's just going to be a quick discussion inside, Jeremy. Make sure it's quick, Jeremy said. That's what he said, moron. Dan raised a brow. Gah! Jeremy shouted, frustration boiling over. Just get lost, Danny. Just get lost, Danny, Dan mocked, pitching his voice higher before he gave Jeremy a mocking bow. Whatever you wish, princess. Nate winced when Jeremy raised his hand, shaking violently as he struggled against himself before he lowered it down. Just leave already. Yes, ma'am. Dan grinned before turning on his heel. They all then walked back into the station, leaving Jeremy to fume before the entrance. Dan, you seriously gotta watch your mouth, man. Ben grumbled. He could turn the whole block into a puddle. Nah, he can't. You use magic too, right? There's a limit and he reached his. Yeah, but I'm a sorcerer and he's a wizard. What's the difference? I can't tell any, and you should be able to sense magic, right? Ben didn't know what to answer. He was busy pondering Dan's question. And who's to say he won't come back once he recovers? Nate asked. What if he comes back just to turn you into a puddle? Dan shook his head. You don't know this guy like I do, fellas. He smirked. Jeremy is a total pussy. Best way to negotiate with him is to bully him. Don't give him an inch, or he'll take 100 miles. Tom, if you're going to say no, you got to make it sound like we're really strong here so his boss won't try and wipe us out. Lines say that we got like a... He snapped his fingers. A level 10 sorcerer here, and I bet they won't mess with us anymore. Ain't no way we can afford that 60% they want, which is bullshit anyway. He shook his head. We don't need their help. And what are they offering anyway? Fly around and pop the occasional zombie or gob. Dan shook his head. That ain't worth 60% of everything we got. Nate found himself agreeing with Dan. 60% is bullshit. He nodded. But we don't know how many of these fellas there are out there. For all we know, them other guys on the floating bikes are all the same level as Jeremy. Maybe we could cut some other deal with them. Tom seemed to mull as he stared out at Jeremy, who was tapping his foot like a disappointed parent. He took a deep breath as he seemed to come to a decision, turning to look at Jeremy. We'd prefer to stay on our own, but would be open to negotiations in the future. Tom yelled from the doorway. I hate to say that it doesn't work like this, sir. It's the same as choosing to refuse us. Jeremy called back. And again, do you intend to do us harm if we say no? Tom asked, narrowing his eyes at Jeremy. Like I said, I don't think so. There's no need for bloodshed, and in my honest opinion, it's too early in the apocalypse to squabble over territory. But our gang isn't the only ones out there. Who knows if the others come and torch your station to the ground? We can hold our own. We've got quite a few high-leveled individuals here ourselves. Tom told him, now please, unless you have something else to say, then please leave. Jeremy shrugged and turned to the other bikers. Well, you heard 'em, boys. They chose their funeral. Let's go report back. Boss won't be happy to hear that the pigsty won't comply. He said pointedly. Can't we just take it by force? Larry yelled from above. We're the damn wild hogs, man. We don't take no for an answer. Nate tensed at hearing his suggestion and tightened his grip around his guitar axe. Jeremy facepalmed at hearing the idiot talk. You want to get your head shot off? Be my guest. Huh? They have a sniper on the roof, dumbass, and I doubt it's just one. Did you forget what high-level rangers can do? Jeremy scolded, shaking his head. Larry then looked up, looking stunned. Nate couldn't see him, but he was sure Kevin or Sam was up there, aiming that rifle right at Larry's head. It's not our circus, and these ain't our monkeys. We've busted our ass since dawn, and I just want to go back and rest for crying out loud. Shut the fuck up and let's go. Jeremy waved his hand. Still a pampered little bitch. Dan chuckled, shaking his head. Nate was grateful that Jeremy was too far away to hear that. Things were tense enough as it was, without Dan throwing shit on the fire. As Nate watched Jeremy and his gang fly off on their bikes, he found himself filling with conviction. If the wild hogs became a problem for the station, then Nate would need to get stronger, a lot stronger. Before we leave, hey Dan, Jeremy asked, freezing in the air on his bike before turning back toward the station, his voice amplified by unknown means. What? Dan asked, lifting his chin. A giant middle finger formed in the sky, made of a translucent orange light. Suck it, ground bitch. With that, Jeremy immediately flew away laughing before Dan could respond. I dated his sister for a bit. Dan shrugged. Breakup was bad, and he hated me ever since. This was in high school. He's a fucking loser. He laughed, again shaking his head. We only went out for a month or two. Nate ignored Dan as he began talking about the details of his breakup, instead thinking on how best to level up. He needed to fulfill those side quests, and soon. Jeremy mentioned that there were other gangs out there, and they might not be as nice as the wild hogs. Nate needed to be strong enough to beat their asses, meaning he'd need to go out there and fulfill these quests. Chapter 15, Weekend Warrior. Nate, are you sure about this? Tom asked from behind the closed metal doors of the police station, brows knitted together in concern. You really want to go out there alone? Nate shrugged the empty rucksack onto his back. If I want to fulfill them solo kill quests I have, then I gotta. I'm getting close to a level up, just gotta fill out those 2 solo kill quests, and then I'll be level 3 or 4. He hesitated, depending on if both the classes level up at the same time anyway. Y'all can hold down the fort while I'm gone, right? Nate asked. Don't want nothing happening to you guys while I'm out. Well, ideally, you won't be gone long enough for anything bad to happen, Tom replied with emphasis, but even if something happens, you have to remember that many of us here can hold our own. You have your radio, right? Nate pulled it from his jacket pocket. Yup, it's on the right channel too. Just let me know if something bad's happening, and I'll be right back. Same for you, Tom told him. If you end up trapped somewhere or are otherwise in distress, radio back and either me or Sam will send out a team to help get you out of whatever jam you've ended up in. Nate nodded. Got it. Still open to requests, by the way. He said, gesturing to his rucksack. Gonna stuff this thing with loot too. Gotta make up for 3 days of being useless. Well, aside from the obvious things such as food and weapons, might you be able to get some toilet paper? Tom asked. Nate nodded. That was already on the shopping list, actually. He grinned. Don't want to have to use George's clothes if we run out. Tom just frowned. Joking, he told him, but I'm not going to be going without TP. I got that covered. Alrighty then. Tom nodded. Just gather what you can, don't take any unnecessary risks. Don't cause problems with strangers, don't try and pick a fight you can't win. Oh, and you need to be back before sunset, understand? Tom asked firmly. Nate just stared for a moment. Yes, Dad, he said flatly after a moment. Very good, son. Tom said with emphasis, smiling. Seriously, though, don't get yourself killed, no matter what it is you're trying to get. I'll be all right, Nate said, turning away from the police station. Oh, and radio me if there's anyone needing help. I can go do that while I'm out and about. Will do, and remember, back before sunset, Tom called after Nate as he walked out into the streets. Or you're grounded. Grounded? Nate almost wanted to scoff, thinking it was just a bad joke. But Tom had been dadding everyone around lately, not just him. He could be quite serious about that, for all Nate knew. Best to just play into it like it was a joke. You aren't my real dad, Nate said with mock spite as he walked away. Well, I'm the best you got, Tom called back in a scolding tone with no real heat in it. Good, it was a joke after all, hopefully. He then began making his way through the ruined streets of town, moving further from the police station as he sought out his prey. He needed to kill 25 goblins and 25 zombies to get his next level. He decided to double-check, thinking of his exp to next level screen. It appeared before him as a long rectangular bar at the bottom of his vision. Experience to next level, 150 experience points. The goblins would give 100, the zombies would give 50, which was exactly what he needed. Nate found himself curious as to what his requirements were once he'd first acquired his class. He'd just asked the guys. He hesitated. They probably didn't know either. They only discovered the XP to next level screen a bit before Nate did. Ah well, it didn't really matter all that much. The streets were sparse and quiet today, without even the distant sounds of gunfire to provide ambience. It was eerily quiet, which wasn't what Nate wanted today. To complete his quest, he needed to start fighting some freaks. The normal zombies would be easy. He'd just lure a horde of them to a fence or something they'd have to climb over and bash their heads in when they fell down. It was more the gobs he was concerned about. They were dumbasses, but they weren't literally brain dead like most of the undead. No luring them over fences or couches, he'd need to treat them with more caution. The quest log reflected this with the difference in XP reward. He wondered how much a single zombie kill was in XP compared to a goblin. There had to be more than just one way to advance, after all. The constant fighting after all this began had to have netted him tons of XP after all. As he continued down the ruined, uneven streets, he took the time to pilfer the more intact vehicles, being more wary of entering the houses by himself. Last thing he needed was to get ambushed by another screeching mutant or fall into another goblin trap. He'd much prefer to fight them out here, in the open. But that might not be an option, at least when it came to the gobs. If they could reproduce and all that, then they must have secure locations where they can live in relative safety, meaning he could need to find a goblin camp to fulfill the quest. There were other quests he could fulfill, though, were he unable to fulfill the solo kills. He thought of his quests and side quests screen, pulling it up in the center of his vision. Side quests: entertain over 100 people with soothing songs. Reward: Simps EXP, kill 25 goblins solo. Reward: 100 experience points, kill 25 standard zombies solo. Reward: 50 experience points, Explore the Elven Forest. Reward, 250 experience points. Kill a wood spawn. Reward, Simps XP. Sway an elf with music. Reward, Simps XP. Discover a rune of power. Reward, Simps XP. Greater than encounter and survive an entity more than 5 levels higher than you. Reward, 500 experience points. Breach the spire, 1000 experience. Breaching the spire was out of the question. That XP count alone assured him that it'd be a death sentence at his current level. Same with surviving something more than 5 levels higher than him. Swaying an elf with music didn't sound too bad. Soothing songs could put in some good work. In fact, he'd get more than enough exp just by exploring the Elven Forest. He was guessing that was the vast forest that had appeared in the center of town, somewhat close to the Cyclopean Spire. Killing a single wood spawn sounded nice, but there was the problem of him not knowing what the hell that was or what it was capable of. The fact that it was 100 experience points, same as killing 25 gobs, must have meant that just a single one of those wood freaks was dangerous. Entertaining 100 people with soothing songs would have been a nice, easy one. But there weren't 100 people at the station, unfortunately. Or wait, perhaps he was reading that one wrong. What if that's just in total, not at the same time? He'd have to use soothing songs back at the station when he could, but he had to make sure not to overuse it on folk. He still had no idea what could happen if soothing songs was used too often. The fear of it being addictive was still present in his mind. Finding a rune of power? Well, that would be nice, but he had no idea what one looked like. Maybe he'd know when he saw it or something. For now, he'd stick with the kill quests, and if that didn't pan out, he might try and set up an expedition to go to that forest. Dan and Ben had that same quest after all. Nate stiffened as a sudden unease crept up his spine and he whirled, axe drawn. There, in an alleyway between a wrecked gas station and another pile of rubble, was the gleam of 2 crimson-red eyes staring at him from the darkness of the alley. The darkness surrounding the figure seemed unnatural considering the time of day. The only thing he could see in the alley past its threshold was that pair of hovering red eyes staring right at him. Nate drew his pistol, which Tom had insisted he bring with him, just in case. "The fuck are you?" Nate yelled, aiming the gun straight at the figure. It didn't reply, simply continuing to stare at him, unmoving, unblinking, like some sort of predator. Nate didn't let his unease show on his face, keeping an angered scowl instead. Whatever this thing was, he just had a feeling that he shouldn't let the creature know that he was afraid. He slowly began edging away from the alley, eyes locked on the figure as he went along slowly. Primal instincts told him not to rush, that doing so would identify him as prey to this thing. As he kept staring, his finger inched ever so closer to the pistol's trigger. Something told him it'd be a bad idea if he made the first move, but if it moved a single step anywhere toward him, he'd shoot. Nate's eyes began to tire as the tension grew, each inch he moved, taking an eternity in his mind. His eyes got drier, bringing with them an unbearable sensation that almost made him close his eyes. He stopped himself at the last moment, not wanting to even blink. He had no idea how strong the creature was, but it wasn't a goblin nor a zombie, that was for sure. Best not to get in a fight with it. That and his gut instinct warned him away from conflict, not with this thing. His eyes twitched as he tried his best not to blink. They became itchy and started to burn, and as time passed, it became harder and harder to resist the urge to blink. He felt a chill down his spine as the crimson eyes shifted. He could swear that he could see glee in those bloody orbs, as if they found a new toy to play with. He stumbled over a piece of rubble, cursing loudly as he righted himself before he could fall. His eyes fell away from the alley for only an instant, but when he looked back, the figure was gone. "Where the fuck are you?" Nate yelled as he spun around, eyes scanning the streets for the monster. That was when he heard a feminine voice giggle right beside his ear. Nate whirled and fired off a shot, hitting nothing but air. "Fuck," Nat shouted, spinning around again but seeing nothing. Whatever this thing was, it had to be messing with him now. "You're a bit dull, but in a fun kind of way. I'll keep watching you, dual class," it whispered right in his ear again. "Gah!" He turned again, eyes wide. Once again, there was nothing there. His breathing quickened as he scanned the streets, but the woman or creature, whatever she may have been, was long gone. Whatever it had been, it couldn't have been more than 5 levels higher than him, otherwise that side quest would have just been fulfilled. Right? Oh shit, Nate paled as he realized what he'd just done. He had just fired off a shot, practically ringing the dinner bell for every zombie for miles around. Right as he had the thought, 2 zombies emerged from a half-destroyed clothing store to his right. They broke through the store's glass display and growled as they saw him, oily black eyes wide as they sprinted at him. "Fuck off," he yelled, holstering his pistol before readying his axe as they approached. Nate waited, axe reared back like a baseball bat. The 2 zombies were a similar speed, both the corpses reaching him at the same time. He swung once they were within arm's reach, splitting both of their skulls in a single slice. Both corpses fell to the ground with heavy thuds, blood fountaining from the missing top halves of their skulls. His troubles weren't over there, as he began hearing dozens of groans coming from all directions. There had to be at least 100 undead voices crying out, ready to come tear him limb from limb. Fuck, Nate was strong, but he wasn't damn delusional. He wasn't going to be able to fight off that many at the same time, not on his own anyway. He took off down a nearby alley, sighting a few zombies shuffling down it and toward him. He cut the nearest one down, pushing forward with a snarl. Another zombie crawled out from behind a few trash bags, hands outstretched for his boot. Nate cursed before he sent a boot crashing into the creature's face. The top half of the skull caved inward like an eggshell, plopping down as he ran forth. He slashed through another few zombies as he went, severing heads, limbs, and whatever else his axe blade could bite into. When he emerged on the other side of the alley, he breathed a sigh of relief, seeing that no other corpses patrolled this street. He could hear them converging where he had just been, though, best to get out of sight quickly. He rushed away from the mouth of the alley, taking deep breaths as his eyes scanned the streets for the red-eyed creature. Even now, he didn't know where it was hiding. No, not it, she. Nate took a deep breath. She said she was going to be watching him, which means he wasn't seen as prey for now. Then again, being stalked was predatory, but he more so meant that he wasn't going to be eaten. Hopefully. Her considering him entertainment wasn't much better, though, and Nate didn't know what that would entail. Wait, she called me dual class. How did she know? His eyes widened at the realization. He shook his head. That revelation was unnerving, but freaking out about it wouldn't do him any good. So what if she knows? Big deal. He had to calm down, focus, and strategize. He wasn't in any sort of threat. He tightened his grip around his axe as a zombie stumbled through another alley. That one was then immediately followed by 10. Once the group of shambling corpses saw him, they snarled like a pack of dogs before charging straight at him. It was as if the sight of his ugly mug offended their very existence, bringing them a wrathful vigor. Maybe Nate couldn't take out 100 at once, but 10. He grinned. Should be easy enough, then he'd be over halfway done with that solo kill quest. Finding the last few he'd need should be easy enough after killing these guys. Nate then charged towards the small horde. He'd need to kill them quickly, because he was certain the other horde had heard the commotion by now. Soon another 100 would pour in from that alley, and he didn't want to have to deal with that. Chapter 16. A New Level. Nate huffed and puffed as he sat behind a counter, sweat dripping from every pore as a horde of zombies milled around outside, unaware of his presence. The store was empty now, littered with freshly killed corpses, or re-killed, he supposed. It was an electronics store, like everything else, half destroyed and almost completely looted of everything within. Almost, Nate had pocketed a smartphone, intending to give it to Ben to make up for the one Nate had smashed. He wasn't sure if Ben could get it working or not, but it looked kinda like the same model he had before, kinda. Besides that, though, he was certain that he'd fulfilled the zombie kill quest by now, but he didn't get any indicator for doing so yet. He couldn't have miscounted. He'd definitely killed over 20 of the undead by now. Maybe he needed to check the menu for the quest to complete. He brought up his side quest menu, shocked when a burst of digital-looking confetti burst in his face, the sound of a crowd cheering hitting his ears. Yay! The voices cheered loudly, text matching the screen. The fuck? Nate whispered harshly as the confetti vanished. You finished your first side quest. Congratulations, a favorite song of yours will now play to celebrate this great accomplishment. We make our selection based off of songs previously listened to across your lifespan. We're sure you'll love this pick from your pre-world pile life. Baby cakes, ooh, ooh, ooh. A feminine man's voice sang loudly, "No." Nate groaned, "Fuck." He suffered as the song began to play against his will. He closed his screen, but still the song continued to play, echoing throughout the store. "Volume down," Nate said firmly. "Song off, no song." Still, Baby Cakes continued to play, assaulting his ears and drawing a series of groans from outside the store. This damn stupid song was now going to be the damn reason he was going to get killed. No way, he wouldn't allow it. He gathered himself, darting out of the back door and slamming it shut behind him, Baby Cakes still loudly playing as he did so. He'd emerged into a secluded space with a large dumpster against a far wall. "Shit," he cursed as he found another 3 zombies here waiting for him. He slammed the door shut behind him. Baby Cakes, ooh, ooh, ah. I love my baby cakes, ooh, ooh, ah." The voice continued to sing loudly, his teeth clenched as he took out his wrath on the zombies in his path, rushing through the open door of the next building to see that it was a furniture store. Well, the selection wasn't exactly intact any longer, being mostly torn fabric and splintered wood at this point. He needed to stay ahead of the horde until this damn stupid song quit playing. Then he could catch his breath. That would mean not staying in one place for very long, for he could already see a few more zombies milling toward the front of the store through the shattered glass windows ahead. Nate backed out of the furniture store, slamming that door shut as well before he heard violent thumping coming from the other store's door. Moans could be heard from the street as another large horde approached from the other side of the chain link, and turning around, Nate could see that the other fence was clear. He shouldered his guitar and leapt onto the fence, quickly scaling it before landing on the other side, which happened to be another alleyway. "Baby, I can't have my cakes without you in it. Baby cakes, ooh, ooh, ha." "Shut up," Nate yelled, heat entering his face as he darted down the alley. He heard the doors he'd slammed earlier burst open, groans echoing down the alley. "You warm my oven up, baby cakes, baby cakes." "Fuck off with that shit," Nate yelled. "I hate that fucking song." He then heard another giggle from a nearby rooftop, turning to see nothing yet again. Whatever, he didn't care, had to run away from Baby Cakes. That was when the feminine man's voice reached an even more obnoxious pitch. "You're my sweet baby cakes," it screeched, the groans of the dead growing with it in tandem. He heard the damn fence come crashing down behind him as he entered another street, seeing another massive group of them converging on his location from all sides. Shit, what now? He slowed as he neared the center of the street, looking all around him while trying to block out Baby Cakes. It was hard to pick a path of least resistance, as the crowd was evenly spread out now, 100 heads of snarling zombies ready to tear him apart. A particular one of them was a tall, bug-eyed zombie with far too many chins and an extraordinarily massive left arm the width of a trash can. It stared at him, with drool running down its buck-toothed mouth, its expression slowly changing to an excited grin. As Baby Cakes reached an all-time high, the zombie squealed in joy. "Barbie! Cakes!" it screeched as it sped towards him, knocking over any other zombies in its path with its oversized left arm. "Oh, for fuck's sake," Nate shouted, "you gotta be kidding me." So now they could not only talk, they could have shitty taste in music too. He drew his pistol. Baby cakes." The feminine man sang in a crescendo, almost drowning the sound of the pistol shots. 2 bullets flew past the zombie, but the third struck him in the neck. The zombie shrugged the bullet off and laughed while screaming, "Barbie cakes." He could hear that damn giggling again, head whipping backward to catch a glimpse of those red eyes again. The bitch thinks this is funny. What the hell was wrong with people these days? Or perhaps people was the wrong word. Gah! Whatever. He wasn't gonna die like this, getting torn apart by zombies. He still had too much to do, too much to make up for. "Gobble up my baby cakes," the voice continued singing, and that damn stupid song was still playing. Rage. "Shake me up, baby cakes, baby cakes." The big-armed creature almost moaned, fueling Nate's anger to new extremes. His guitar axe would have likely broken under his grip, hadn't it been magically enhanced. Nate let out a guttural roar in defiance at both the damn song and the deformed zombie as he ran towards the mutant freak. The mutant seemed elated to see him ready to face it. It slapped away a zombie in its path before raising its fist high into the air. Once Nate was within proximity, it sent its massive fist sailing down towards him, but Nate weaved to the side, completely evading the attack. Barbie caca! Shut up, Nate screamed as he slammed his fist into the thing's jaw. His eyes widened in horror as his fist was swallowed by its thick flesh. It was as if he had hit Play-Doh, the monster's flesh seeming to suck in his hand. The buck-toothed zombie grinned. Nate swung his axe, but the zombie twisted, its fist crashing into his side and sending Nate cartwheeling across the street. The world spun as pain exploded from his side until it all came to a sudden halt, agony cracking through his back as he slid down to the asphalt with a cry of anguish. His vision blurry, he looked to see what he'd collided with, seeing that it had been a lamppost, a Nate-sized dent in its steel frame. Baby cakes, hoo-hoo-ha. The song continued playing as Nate rose to his feet, gritting his teeth and ignoring the taste of blood on his tongue. He felt something creaking in his back now, but Nate couldn't stop fighting to inspect the damage. There was just no time. "Barbie-kaz!" the zombie screamed as it came rushing towards him. Nate jumped out of the way and heard the metal of the lamppost screech as the zombie collided with it shoulder first. "Ooh, ah, dip me and munch me," the effeminate man sang at the top of his lungs. Nate shook his head, readying his axe as the horde closed in toward him. He could maybe carve a path through, but he'd need to take care of this big-armed freak first. The mutant zombie seemed disoriented as it struggled to rise to its feet. "Barbie!" it moaned. Nate darted toward the zombie, axe raised high over his head. Nate's eyes widened as the freak turned to face him with a smile on its face and its chins bloated up like a frog's poach. "Fuck!" Nate screamed, quickly diving off to the left in a roll. "Keys!" the mutant screamed at the top of its lungs at Nate's prior position. When he looked back, Nate could see the air reverberate and a wave of force, for the lack of a better term, slammed into two nearby zombies. Their upper bodies practically exploding off their frames and sending them flying backward. A shiver went down Nate's spine, a slice of cold in the heat of his rage. That could have been him, or worse, considering he would have taken the full blast at point blank. The mutated zombie didn't seem to mind that it killed two of its kin. From its horrid laughter, anyone could tell that it found their deaths hilarious. Just what Nate would expect from a sadistic monster that listened to baby cakes of all things. From the corner of his eye, Nate saw a small pack of zombies running towards him in a stumbling jog. The baby cake's mutant's chin sacks began to swell at the same time as it readied another sound blast, leaving Nate stuck between a rock and a hard place. Nate snarled, swinging his axe blade right into the nearest zombie's nose bridge, slicing through its entire face before a fountain of blood spurted from its skull, the top half of its head plopping to the asphalt with twitching eyes. As the half-headed corpse staggered back, Nate kicked it into the two zombies running behind it, causing them to tumble together. He avoided a leaping zombie by leaning to the right. As it landed on the ground, he stomped its head into the concrete, reducing it to mush in one swoop. Baby cakes, ooh, ah, ah. That cursed song was still playing, but Nate was too pissed off to give it any mind, barely thinking as he fought with a snarl on his face. He glanced back at the mutant and found its sacks near full, just in time for 12 zombies to come within arm's reach of him. On instinct, Nate leapt towards the zombies. He roared, using his axe as a shield as he pushed his way through the undead crowd, just in time for the mutant to unleash its attack. With a powerful boom, the zombies took the full brunt of the mutant's blast, tearing through 8 of them and sending the last 4 tumbling towards Nate. Nate gave an angry grin. "Eight's the limit, you ugly bastard," he asked the mutant before making quick work of the downed 4. "Barbie cakeys!" it growled before charging towards him, its sack slowly filling as it got closer. Nate readied his stance and patiently waited for the mutant to get close before he jumped out of its path. As it brushed past him, he let out a roar before swinging his axe towards its skull. To his misfortune, the axe blade struck the inflated chin sacs beneath its jaw, causing one of them to explode. Nate hissed as a heavy gust of wind blasted in his face. The mutant, on the other hand, let out an agonizing scream as it reeled back. Nate continued with the offensive, the edges of his vision reddening further as he kept hacking at its flesh, barely causing it any harm thanks to its thick, almost elephant-like skin. The remaining sacs in its throat continued to grow as Nate tried to hack at them, the mutant struggling to defend them from Nate's axe. Once they reached their full potential, the mutant swung its arm to push him away and opened its gaping maw, only to have the guitar axe hooked into its cheek, stabbing through and lodging it inside its thick skin. Nate wrenched the neck of his guitar with all his might, rearing the struggling mutant's head in the direction of a group of zombies. The damn thing didn't send out its roar, though, as Nate had wanted, gurgling as it continued to struggle against his guitar. He needed to expel that damn air. On wrathful instinct, he let go of his guitar with one hand, launching his fist into the largest air sac. That did it, for the creature let out its wall of force, sending it flying toward the zombies. Without the extra force of the sack Nate had burst, the force was considerably lesser, but it still cracked skulls and sent the zombies flying backward. Baby cakes, ooh, ooh, ooh. How is this shit still fucking playing? Nate screamed at the mutant as if it were its fault. It just stared at him for an instant before it tried to grab his axe, but Nate wasn't having it. He stomped right on top of one of its feet, feeling the arc of the zombie's foot flatten beneath the force. It then fell to the ground with a cry of anguish before Nate began kicking its head in. His breathing was ragged, vision red as he brought his foot down over and over again, feeling the thing's skull give out beneath his strikes as he kept the mutant in place with his axe. It was when he felt claws raking his flesh and teeth biting his flesh that he stopped, letting out a roar as his whole world became crimson, all while baby cakes continued to play overhead. "How long is this damn stupid song?" he shouted before ripping his axe free. The corpses were pressing in now, beginning to overwhelm him. But Nate didn't care. He'd had enough of these damn freaks, and he would kill them all. He punched and kicked, slashed and bashed, reducing zombies to mush as he fought through the streets, no longer seeking an escape, but to take out his wrath on those who sought him harm. His body was covered in bites and lacerations, blood seeping down seemingly every inch of him as he pushed on. Time ceased to exist as he fought. He wasn't sure if it had been a minute or an hour, but he didn't stop swinging until there was nothing left around him but twitching corpses. He huffed and puffed, showered in blood from head to toe. Half of it wasn't even his own blood. He fell to one knee, bracing himself against the ground as he shuddered. With his rage dissipating, he was now fully able to feel the full agony that had been wrought upon him. Looking down, he could see that his clothing was in tatters, including the rucksack he had brought with him. His jacket, shirt, and pants hung off him in shredded tatters, his body crisscrossed with bites and slashes, black hair matted down with blood. His vision blurred, and it took everything in him not to simply collapse right there on the ground, to let death claim him to end the pain. Yet he did not. There was still work he needed to do. Dying here wasn't an option. He struggled for his radio, only to see that it was no longer at his belt. He looked around the bloody streets, but it was useless. His vision was tunneling now. Sounds were becoming distant. He did see two little pinpricks of red staring at him from a nearby rooftop, though, unmoving. That damn bitch was still just watching him and seemed quite content to just let him die here. Well, he was going to prove her damn wrong. He grit his teeth, standing to his feet with a blood-filled cough. He felt satisfied as the crimson eyes widened with apparent surprise. "That's right, I ain't as soft as you think I am." Even his own thoughts were sounding far away, but he ignored that for now. All he needed to do was make it back to the station, then Tom or Clyde could patch him up. He'd come back for Ben's new phone after that. It had to be around here somewhere. He fell to his knees again, scraping the skin right off them as they dragged across the asphalt. He winced as his body began to fail him, sinking closer and closer to the ground as blood dripped from him like rainfall. A single pale, black-veined hand swiped at him from the corner of his vision, and Nate scowled. If he was going to die here, he was going to make sure that all the ones responsible followed him. Nate grabbed the wrist, dragging the zombie into his fading view to see that it had been a thin man, its lower half missing, likely due to being bisected by Nate. Its jaws snapped toward him, and Nate seized its skull with both hands. Rage. With a mighty shout, he began applying pressure to the skull until the thing's head crunched inward violently, ending its unlife permanently. Right after that, Nate felt his body seize. A blue pillar of light then surrounded him, forcefully raising his broken body to its feet. He let out a scream of anguish as freezing cold encapsulated him, his wounds forcefully sealing and his vision clearing. He blinked as his screen appeared, unbeckoned before his face. Level up. Nate blinked in shock as the pillar of light dissipated, his status screen appearing right beneath the level up. Name, Nathan J. Greaves. Class, BarDBarian/Bard. Level 4, 2+2. Chapter 17. Out of the Shadows. The fuck just happened? Nate asked himself as he stared at his now fully healed body. His clothes were tattered, his skin was caked with black zombie blood, and so was his hair. Yet there was nary a scratch on his body. Tom or Clyde weren't nowhere around here, but clearly something had healed him. Could it be? Nate turned to the glowing red eyes and yelled, "Did you heal me?" He could hear the girls guffaw at the question, as if the idea of her healing him was ludicrous. I can at least rule out the possibility of her being a healer. Nate snorted at the thought. Yeah, his brain wasn't working right if he could even think of this stalker freak as a healer. One look at those orbs was all he needed to tell that she was nothing more than a predator that viewed him as potential prey. He sighed. With the zombies all cleared and he having leveled up, there was no reason for him to stick around, especially not after all this. He might have tried doing the Goblin mission. Heck, maybe with him leveling up, new missions would come out of the woodworks, but he didn't feel like opening the quests menu now. He just wanted to go home. He groaned as he popped his neck. Healed or not, he was exhausted. It was best to gather some stuff, find Ben's new phone, and mosey back to the station. When he took the first step, however, he heard a loud tearing sound right before he fell on his face with a curse. He looked back to see that what remained of his tattered pants had caught on a jagged piece of red scrap metal, a ruined stop sign that had somehow been twisted and flung all the way over here. The red-eyed woman let out a cackle as Nate covered his dignity with a scowl, glaring up at the eyes while grinding his teeth. Nate grumbled something under his breath, his face turning a shade of red as the woman continued to laugh at him. He scanned the streets, hoping that there was a clothing store somewhere nearby. His eyes widened when he noticed a store with a giant, sinister skull on its roof. The smiling skull had a pair of large black bat wings stretching out over the top of the entrance, along with the words "Brutalization Station" written in deep red on the store's black sign. Nate weighed his options. This felt too convenient, almost like a trap specifically designed for him. There could be anything in there ready to eat him, and the building was far too intact for his liking. Sure, it could have just been one of the places in town that had gotten lucky during the apocalypse, like the station and the motel, but this seemed too good to be true. He should probably pick out some clothes somewhere else. But he couldn't deny the pull of the giant skull. He hadn't dressed like a proper metal head in a while, and it wasn't like he had to follow a dress code for work anymore. No, it was too perfect. There was another clothing store nearby after all, this one properly half destroyed and everything. He'd just go in there and... Nate froze as he looked through the windows of the place, noting that all of the mannequins within wore polo shirts with khaki shorts, along with a pair of socks and sandals. He cringed away from the store. That was something that Tom would wear on his off days. That was Grandpa wear. Goodness me, Red Eyes called from a nearby rooftop. Such a hussy you are, put some clothes on. This ain't exactly a party for me, you know, Nate yelled, failing to bite back his retort. She merely laughed again, Nate grumbling as he walked towards Brutalization Station. Just ignore her, man, get the new threads, find Ben's phone, then get the hell out of here. He walked into the store, surprised to see that most of its interior was still mostly intact as well, with only a few shelves and leather-clad mannequins knocked over. Much to his satisfaction, the clothing was all very much in his taste. Lots of blacks and reds, spiked studs and steel skulls. This place was made for him. He lifted his axe with a scowl. That's the problem with it. Too good. Couldn't be safe. There'd be a screecher mutant or some other freak in the ceiling, or hell, maybe the clothes would try to strangle him or some shit. It just wasn't safe. His eyes scanned the interior warily as he moved through, paying particular attention to the mannequins as he did so. He moved throughout the whole store like a tweaker, checking beneath every nook and cranny and searching every room behind the counter, only to find nothing there. The ceiling seemed intact too, but he kept his ears open for any sounds as he retreated to the staff bathroom. He shut the door and let out a sigh, staring into the mirror to see a blood-drenched figure. He ran a hand down his face, eyes wide. Brutal. He nodded to himself. Would have been a good look for a concert for sure, but in an apocalypse this wasn't exactly good. There could be a trillion blood-borne diseases he was going to contract, but thankfully Tom would be able to cure him of that now. He prayed that the water would still work, flicking on the sink's water and seeing it sputter to life. Yes, Nate yelled excitedly. Fuck yes. He turned it off before returning to the clothing section, picking out his new outfit along with some other ones he'd used to clean himself. It took a while, but eventually he finally scrubbed off the last of the blood from his skin and hair, the floor practically flooded with bloody water by time he was done. He let out a sigh as he used a few other clothes to dry himself off, discarding them before he approached his new outfit of choice. Red-laced shoes, fresh boxers, dark blue jeans, dark t-shirt, along with a studded dark leather jacket, the sleeves torn off and frayed for style. He threw them on, affixing a leather steel-spiked wristband to his left arm. It was more for style, but it covered a large portion of his forearm too, could keep off some biting teeth. He affixed another leather wristband to his other wrist, this one with steel studs instead of spikes. He frowned when he realized that his new pants didn't quite fit the way he wanted them to. He left the now humid bathroom, moving throughout the store until he saw a particular item of note. His eyes widened when he saw that it was glowing the same shade of blue that his guitar had been. Could this be another magic item, meant for him even? It was a leather belt, a large horned steel skull as the buckle. It had a demonic grin, the hollow eyes seeming to stare at him expectantly. He reached a hand out toward it hesitantly, lifting it from the display cautiously. Instantly the glow vanished. The belt then became animate, writhing like a snake and eliciting a gasp of shock from Nate as it wriggled out of his hands. He tried to stop the thing from looping itself around him, but it was too late. Its eyes glowed with red cracks of lightning, steam hissing out of its sharp teeth as it settled in, settling within the belt loops. It didn't try to constrict nor harm him in any way, seeming to be content with where it was. Would it try to kill him if Nate dared to remove it? Was he stuck wearing these same pants for the rest of his life? He tentatively ran a finger along the skull, but got no reaction from it. He let out a sigh as he stared down at it. If it was a magic item like his guitar, it had to be useful, right? He'd need to find out what it could do. He mulled on that a while as he observed it through a mirror. You alive?" he asked the belt, feeling like a moron. No response. Was there a button on this thing? Nate began fiddling with the belt, but found no such thing across its cool surface. No buttons. So what? Was he supposed to take it out and whip people with it? That couldn't be what it was good for, but with them horns it had, he didn't doubt that it had hurt. Maybe there was a way to figure this out with the system. There were quest menus, the status. What about equipment? Equipment? He asked. Lo and behold, a new blue screen popped in front of his eyes. It had a simple diagram representing his body with a list of equipped items on the right. Nate scratched his head as he didn't know how to operate the thing, and scrolling and tapping with his finger didn't seem to work. He read the item names and focused on the belt. Fiendbearer. Rank SL, a belt fashioned from the bones and soul of a once mighty storm demon. It roamed the land, spreading chaos and destruction in its path, only to be defeated and sealed by the people it oppressed. Now its name has been forgotten to time, and even it can barely remember its origin, with its only purpose being to serve its wielder. Increases strength by 2, constitution by 1, and intelligence by 2. It gives the wearer the ability to use blood lightning. He looked down at the thing and poked at it with a finger. It didn't seem to appreciate that as it tried to bite at his fingers. Fuck, Nate screamed, pulling his hand away to see the belt's grin widen. Little shit, he grumbled. What does SL even mean? The system immediately explained the rank. Soul-bound weapons and objects are powerful living items bound to the wielders that they chose. Soul-bounds are a rare oddity that only few people will ever interact with. The powers and boosts differ between SL rank objects, and not all of them possess sentience. They tend to grow in power at the same pace as their owners. Nate clenched his jaw. All of that was nifty, and all but that left him with even more questions. Why did the belt choose him? Did this place appear with it, or did it choose this place to attract him? And why now, of all times? Was Nu watching his fight to see if he was worthy of another one? Nate shook his head. He had no clue, but he was interested in learning how to use this blood lightning. Sounded brutal as hell, and he'd need that to fight the freaks. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. If it was magic, he'd need to focus, right? He patiently expanded his senses, trying to feel the mana or whatever Ben talks about seeing in the air, but all he could find was a whole lot of nothing. Maybe he was approaching things the wrong way. Ben wasn't exactly focused most of the time anyways. Nate shifted his legs and raised his hand forward before shouting, "Lightning blast!" And nothing happened. He stood there posing, feeling like a nerd dumbass, staring at himself in the mirror. He heard the belt snicker at his attempts, causing him to frown. He flicked it between its horns and it hissed, steam seeping between its teeth. Well, why don't you try helping out? You're the magical tool after all. If it had eyes to roll, Nate was certain that it would have. Hey pal, you're the one who decided to be my belt. The thing says you can give me lightning, so where's the lightning? It didn't reply, its sharp teeth snapping shut. Little shit, Nate grumbled before looking back up at the mirror. Blood lightning? He asked, thrusting his hand outward. Again, nothing happened, ire beginning to build in his chest. It was like getting a brand new piece of tech, unwrapping it and plugging it in, only to find out that it didn't work. He stuffed down his anger, though. He needed to think more like Tom, not some dumbass, especially if he wanted to get to the bottom of how this damn thing worked. What would Tom say? He mulled on that a while, staring at himself in the mirror before his eyes widened. Shit. He'd forgotten to go find Ben's new phone and his radio. What if the station was under attack? Cursing his dumbassery, Nate bolted out of the store, guitar axe drawn in case any more zombies had arrived while he was indoors. Much to his annoyance, a couple indeed had arrived, only two of them, swaying weakly towards him once they took notice of his presence. He looked down to his fresh outfit, then back up to the zombies, then down at his axe blade. There had to be a way to kill these guys cleanly. Maybe blood lightning would only work if there was something he had to kill. He raised his hand towards the zombies. Lightning blast. No response. Blood lightning? He asked, only for nothing to happen. Come on already. A little help? Nate asked the belt. It ground its metallic teeth together in response. Fat load of help you are. Nate told it. If all you do is look pretty, then get the hell off my pants. Them horns are pokey. The belt shook its head. He brandished his guitar. Now this, she's a real tool, no magic but made of metal for metal. He then played a decent riff for emphasis, scowling down at the useless belt. See that? That's fucking useful, and that can't even kill things. Not yet anyway. He then extended his index and pinky fingers from his closed fist. The eyes of the belt then began glowing red, crackles of lightning playing in the hollow caves of its gaze. He blinked, dropping the gesture, only to see the red lightning vanish. Holy shit. He tacitly did the gesture again, and the lightning returned. He then pointed his fingers towards the two zombies, but still nothing happened. He then let out a grunt of frustration, a spark of red arcing between his two extended fingers. He paused again. Could it be? He grit his teeth before letting out a powerful scream. Crimson sparked between his extended fingertips before exploding outward, snaking across the air and straight at zombies. The twin arm-thick bolts struck them, their bodies convulsing violently as the crimson lightning roiled up and down their bodies. Eventually, the arcs sped up towards their heads, their skulls practically popping like a balloon. Bone shrapnel flew across the street as bloody brain confetti soared in the air, Nate taking a step back to avoid a few chunks of grey goop from hitting his new threads. Nate blankly stared at his hand, looking between it and the bodies before muttering, "Brutal." The skull grinned with a pleased look on its skeletal face. If it had a body, it'd be puffing its chest for sure. With the zombies dead, Nate looked around the aftermath of his 2 bloodbaths, hoping to spot the radio somewhere around here. He slowly walked near the corpse of the mutant zombie he killed earlier. If the phone and radio were somewhere, it'd likely be around there. He felt something tug at his waist. The belt was thrashing about, trying to leap to the mutant zombie's enlarged arm with snapping steel teeth, like it wanted to take a damn bite out of the thing. "What the hell is wrong with you, you freak?" he asked it with a confused frown. Nate couldn't understand what got it all flustered and carefully approached the dead mutant. He poked it with the guitar axe, much to the belt's apparent horror, its jaw hanging agape. Nate groaned. What could have made it so upset about that? "You almost fed its magical core to your instrument, dual class," a voice said from behind him. "Fuck," Nate yelled, scrambling back as Red Eyes began to giggle at him, standing only a few feet away from him. She was still wreathed in shadow, but he could see now that whoever she was a pipsqueak. Those crimson eyes barely came up to his ribs. He glared at her, irritated that she'd gotten the jump on him yet again. "Anything you'd like to share with the rest of the class?" he begrudgingly asked the mysterious girl, her eyes sparkling with apparent glee. "Just 2 nuggets of knowledge. Mutants and greater beasts have magical crystals that have a plethora of uses," she explained, drawing slightly closer to him. "You could feed them to bound items, for example. Like that belt of yours." The skull nodded vigorously. "Of course, you could always give it to your axe to enhance it as well, but that is ultimately your choice. This was your kill, after all," she said, her eyes staring up at him. Nate stared back at her a moment. "Why are you following me?" he asked her. "I'm just some dumbass." Strangely, this got another giggle from her. "I don't get much in the way of entertainment. Your journey is sure to be an amazing one, I will observe." Nate glowered at her. "Don't you want to do more than just watch?" he asked her. "Could have used some help earlier, if you didn't notice." She fell silent for a long while, and just as Nate was about to resume searching for the radio, she told him, "I can't." "You mean won't?" he told her. "I know what I said." She said, tone taking a sudden edge, "I am not really here with you now. I am bound eternally to the lower levels of the spire. This is the most I can do. I can't harm you, nor help you. But I can watch. That's all I can do from where I am." Nate frowned. "What, you're stuck in there? You a prisoner or something?" he asked, gesturing to the towering dark spire that loomed over everything. "I certainly am," she replied, tone emotionless. "But enough about me. I wish to see where else your journey leads. Please continue on." A strange pit formed in his gut at hearing her predicament. He didn't know her name or even what she was capable of. But there was something depressing about hearing that she was a prisoner, and that this was her only way of coping with her isolation. How she could project out of there, he didn't know, but he was relieved to hear that she didn't mean him any harm. He could just happily ignore her from now on then. But that didn't feel right either. Didn't he tell himself that he'd never hesitate to do the right thing ever again? He firmed his jaw as he stared down at her, resolve filling him as he slung his guitar over his shoulder. He didn't know her or even like her, but being trapped in a place like that couldn't have been pleasant. Besides, if he and Dan breached the spire, they'd get 1,000 experience for it. It wasn't as if there was nothing to gain from doing this either. Mind made up, he grinned. "I'll just break you out. That way you don't have to watch." Nate nodded to her. Red Eyes widened. "What?" she asked him. He scowled. "You heard me, lady. I'm gonna break you out of there so you'll stop watching me like some kind of freak. You'll owe me one too. Don't think this is gonna be a freebie." Her eyes turned away from him at that. "Don't be foolish," she told him in a monotone. "You'd die, or worse. Just go about your life. I'll be glad to watch from here." "No way." Nate shook his head. "I need the experience anyway. Getting you out is just a side quest. I ain't having you follow me around all the time. It's damn creepy." I'll let you out so you can go do fun stuff on your own. You can't, she started, turning back to him. Nate glared. Stop me then, nerd. She scoffed. Very well, it's your funeral. No thank you? Nate asked as he spotted his radio, swiping it up from the ground. I appreciate your intentions. She told him genuinely. Good enough for me. He said before clicking on his radio. Hey Tom, it's Nate. I'm doing all right. Heading back now. Roger that. Stay safe. I heard gunfire earlier. Tom's voice crackled back. Yeah, that was me. He said, shooting a short glare at Red. Well, you need to be more careful. What if you'd gotten swarmed? Tom asked. Funny you say that. Nate sighed. I'll tell you all about it once I get back. All right then, as long as you're safe right now. Stay safe, Tom said. You too, Nate replied before clicking the radio to his belt loop. What is that contraption of yours? Red asked. I'll tell you, but you need to tell me your name first. Nate smirked, flicking the antennae. She giggled again. I am Aerith. Chapter 18. Welcome home. The damn belt had torn into the mutant zombie's arm with a fervor that reminded Nate of a piranha, digging through the arm before gobbling up some glowing red crystal, its steel teeth crunching through it with ease before it swallowed, its eyes glowing a deep red before it hopped back toward Nate, shaking off the blood like a dog as it went. It wrapped itself around him once again before letting out a loud metallic belch. Nate grimaced as a strange, acrid stench reached his nostrils, waving his hand in front of his face before moving to search for Ben's new phone. It didn't take long for Nate to find Ben's phone. There was a small spider-webbed crack in the corner of it now, but that wouldn't be that big a deal, he was sure. Nate pocketed it before he began heading back in the direction of the station, Aerith trailing behind him. The magic she was using was some kind of projection spell, as she said she wasn't truly here and thus could neither help nor harm him. It was awkward as hell, though, being spied on like this. He still didn't know how he was going to explain to the guys that he was being stalked by a harmless apparition. In fact, it might be a good idea to radio Tom and let him know about Aerith before he got back. Nate did so, explaining to Tom what Aerith was and that she wasn't any real trouble. Tom had asked Nate to politely explain to Aerith to stay out of the station, as she may scare some of the children. Surprisingly, Aerith didn't seem opposed to Tom's logic, stating that terrorizing children wasn't something she'd classify as good fun. With that resolved, he continued skulking through the streets, avoiding zombies as he went. Surprising that he hadn't seen a goblin in a while, but Nate supposed that could simply be because they were just as viable a target for zombies as anyone else. So of course, they were staying out of view. If there were gobs around, they'd be sneaking around like he was right now. The best scenario would be that they'd all died while he was knocked out, gobbled up by zombies well before they could reproduce. With an environment like this, it wasn't likely that the gobs would be able to get a good population going anyway. Food was going to run out around here eventually. They couldn't scrounge forever. Maybe they could subsist on rotting zombie meat, but that wasn't infinite either. They'd have to leave town eventually. Just like Nate and the guys. The same rules applied for humans. There wouldn't be enough food around here forever. Inevitably, every scrap of bread or crumb of chip would be eaten up. Then everyone would have to skip town and go somewhere else. Nate had already decided a while ago that he'd be leaving here to head to Twin Falls, after ensuring that Tom and the others would be safe anyway. Probably have to go out to the country and start growing their own food. Or maybe the South Hills to hunt for meat, something like that. There were a lot of people in the station right now too. That was a lot of mouths to feed. Maybe someone could magic up some food eventually. He'd ask Tom once he got back if there was anyone with a farmer class or something like that. His mind wandered to his belt again, wondering if there was a limit to how many times he could fire off his blood lightning. If he could just spam that forever, then he didn't need to worry about getting up close with anything ever again. He froze as he really thought about what he had done earlier with that lightning. Was that not the most metal thing anyone had ever done in their lives? Nate had shot blood-red lightning from his fingertips to make zombie skulls explode. If that wasn't album cover worthy, he didn't know what was. Maybe he could finally give his guitar a name. He grimaced, shaking his head. He still wasn't worthy of that. He still needed to make amends before he could give her back her name. He crossed a street quickly, passing into another alleyway as he thought instead of his belt again, and the potential limits of the blood lightning. Equipment. He found the belt again, squinting at the description. Fiend-bearer, rank SL, a belt fashioned from the bones and soul of a once mighty storm demon. It roamed the lands, spreading chaos and destruction in its path, only to be defeated and sealed by the people it oppressed. Now its name has been forgotten to time, and even it can barely remember its origin, with its only purpose being to serve its wielder. Increases strength by 2, constitution by 1, and intelligence by 2. It gives the wearer the ability to use blood lightning. It didn't say anything about number of uses, but there was no way it was infinite. That would be too good to be true. Apparently, it made him stronger, tougher, and even a lot smarter, apparently. His thinking did seem to be a tad sharper than it had been before donning the belt. Nate didn't think he'd be doing calculus anytime soon, but he felt a bit less like a dumbass than he used to. His eyes then found the description of his guitar, purposefully skipping over her name. $$ rank SL. A guitar wielded by the former lead guitarist of False Witness, a man whose pride destroyed his band. While not possessed of sapience, it still holds desires despite that, a wish to be played. This is an unbreakable item, only able to be damaged by another unbreakable item of the same rank or higher. Usable with bardic and barbaric skills. Enhances bardic and barbaric skills when wielded by a dual class. That was true. Nate's pride had been why False Witness had been disbanded. It had been all his fault, he knew that. He intended to set things right though, one way or another. He was glad that the guitar was apparently unbreakable. That explained why the neck was still straight even after all the punishment he'd put her through. Hell, even the blade was still wickedly sharp, not having dulled in the least. He supposed that meant he wouldn't need to worry about maintaining it if that were the case. As the station finally came within view, Nate summoned the Exp to Next Level screen, feeling curious. Exp to Next Level, 2000. Damn! Nate winced. Looked like he had a longer way to go to next level than he thought. Could this be because of his dual class? He was now level 4 after all, not level 3 despite leveling up from 2. His two classes seemed to be splitting up the experience, meaning that it would take him twice as much experience to advance than anyone else. He was sure that everyone else's requirements were far lesser than his own. He then summoned up his quest log, seeing that the main quests hadn't yet changed. The side quests, however, side quests entertain over 100 people with soothing songs. Reward, Simts XP, kill 25 goblins solo. Reward, 100 experience points. Explore the Elven Forest. Reward, 250 experience points. Kill a wood spawn. Reward, Simts Exp. Sway an elf with music. Reward, Simts Exp. Discover a rune of power. Reward, Simts Exp. Greater than encounter and survive an entity more than 5 levels higher than you. Reward, 500 experience points. Breach the spire. Reward, 1,000 experience points. Strangle Sam to death. Reward, 2,000 experience points. Leave Dan to die. Reward, 2,000 experience points. Kill Tom before he kills you. Reward, 2,000 experience points. Nate's stomach lurched as he read the new quests. What the fuck? He muttered, feeling sick as he closed the screen. Strangle Sam, abandon Dan to die, kill Tom. Fat chance of him doing any of that shit. It was clear what was going on here. Nu was trying to mess with his head and tempt him to do evil-ass shit. Well, it wasn't going to work. Wording it like Tom was going to kill him, fat chance of that. Clearly it was worded that way to make him paranoid. Eat shit, Nu, not a chance. He muttered to himself as he approached the station, pulling out his radio. Hey guys, I'm back. Can you let me in? Glad to hear it. We'll get you back in. Tom's voice responded as Nate came to stand before the barred entrance. Already, though some of the occupants were clearing the entrance for him, Dan coming forward to lift the bars. Fancy new threads, huh? Dan quirked a brow as Nate passed him, shoulders slackening. I got torn up pretty bad. Old clothes too, Nate replied as Dan slid the bars shut once again. The other guys guarding the lobby looked to one another before back to Nate. You look fine to me. Dan rubbed his chin after sliding the table back in place. I leveled up, he said, hoping that would clear up any confusion. That did seem to do the trick, as Dan nodded. Ah, makes sense. Yeah, every time I level up, I get completely healed, same for everyone else. Damn good thing it did then, cause I got fucked up out there, almost died. Nate groaned, plopping down on one of the couches. Nate then began to regale his experience with the zombies, along with how he'd gotten his new outfit and how Aerith was now following him around. Dan took particular interest in that, especially after Nate brought up his intent to go for the Spire quest. That's the experience I need to get to level 5, Dan said, so if you're down, bro, I'll go with you. Nate nodded. Hell yeah, man, I ain't going there by myself. Anyone else got that quest? He asked the other men in the lobby. They shook their heads, some talking about how they only had solo kill quests and that they had no intent on fulfilling them. Tom walked into the lobby after that, looking tired as always. Nate stood up, approaching Tom quickly. Hey, we gotta talk. Nate whispered. I got some fucked up quests in my log right now. It's freaking me out. Tom's eyes widened. Well, all right then. Nice clothes, by the way, Tom noted before turning back to the hall, leaving the other people behind. They returned to the radio room, passing by other survivors on the way. Sam was the only other person in here, chin in her palm as she listened for new signals on her headset. She gave Nate a smile and a nod before turning back away, still listening for any signals. Nate then closed the door, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. Boss, I have some seriously screwed up side quests, straight up evil shit. Nate shook his head. I think New's trying to get me to screw us over by offering big X rewards for doing them. Tom's eyes narrowed. Evil quests? What does it want you to do? Nate sighed. It wants me. He hesitated. Just so you know, I don't plan on filling out any of these no matter what. If I wanted to, I wouldn't bother telling you. Tom nodded. I didn't think that you would. He smiled. So go on, what is it? It wants me to kill you, Sam, and Dan. Nate whispered. 2,000 experience each, got the quests after I leveled up. Tom's eyes widened. Gah. He shuddered. I'm glad you decided to share this with me instead of just hiding it. But don't tell anyone else. I know you wouldn't do these things, but others might get worried if they find out they have a giant XP reward hanging over their heads. Nate nodded. All right, makes sense to me. Do you know if anyone else got quests like this? Tom shook his head. No one's come forward if they have. His eyes widened. Good God, now we have to worry about being betrayed from within. Nate frowned. I think there's only one of us with quests like this besides me. A moment of silence passed between them, a moment before Tom nodded. You mean George, he stated. Who else? Nate asked. That guy would skin his own mom if he thought it'd benefit him. The dude's fucked in the head, Tom, you know that. Nate's jaw clenched. If George was fucked in the head and got quests like what Nate had received, then what did that say about himself? Chapter 19, Pumping Iron Power. It had been a full day since Nate had returned to the station, and he felt damn wrong. It wasn't like he was raring to get back out to the streets or anything, but he had the urge to feel his muscles strain and push against some good old-fashioned iron. These past few days had felt like a grueling, relentless marathon, yeah, but that had been mostly cardio. Nate wanted the satisfaction that came from hefting big-ass weights and feeling the power surge through his veins. He needed to pump some iron power. As he headed to the gym, he gathered his hair back into a tight ponytail, the strands brushing against the back of his neck with each step. Knowing he wouldn't be working out in his pristine new outfit, he rummaged through the officers' lockers and found a pair of loose basketball shorts and an ill-fitting tank top. Their worn fabric a testament to many past workouts. Nate just hoped the damn things had been washed before New's apocalypse. As he got closer to the door leading to the gym, he could hear grunts of effort from within. Nate had thought he'd be the only one in there today, but maybe Clyde or Dan had decided to hop in today. That was fine. Nate was going to need some good spotters. He wanted to see how much weight he could lift now that he was all souped from leveling up. Upon entering the gym, Nate paused in the doorway, taking in the new environment. It was a long, narrow space, minimally equipped, but with all the essentials laid out with precision. A couple of sturdy benches lined one side, and a singular squat rack stood in the corner, the black metal scarred white with repeated use. Barbells and dumbbells were neatly arranged on the left side of the chamber, their metallic surfaces gleaming under the fluorescent lights. There were about 3 treadmills lined up against the wall opposite the dumbbells, but Nate had no intention on hitting the mills. His whole damn life was cardio now anyway, no point in using those unless he never went outside again. The air was a curious mix, cool and refreshing, yet thick and humid, likely from the collective exertion of the other people here in the gym. Clarissa was engaged in a steady rhythm on the treadmill, her feet pounding a consistent beat, while Barney was engrossed in a set of curls, his muscles flexing and glistening with effort. Nate, for a brief instant in time, felt normalcy return to his life. An echo of his past schedule as he heard the treadmill whir and Barney let out strained grunts. He smiled, well enough of that shit. Time to get to work. Missing the past wasn't getting him no damn gains. He approached the wall with the dumbbells, grabbing a 70-pounder before hefting it up with surprising ease. Nate blinked at the thing, shocked as he lifted it up and down as if it were a damn twig. It felt like how 10-pounders used to feel. Hot damn, how strong was he right now? He moved up to 80, then to 90, then finally to the 100-pound dumbbell. It was the only one here, unfortunately, its handle still fresh and new-looking compared to those of lesser weight. Probably cause no one in here could lift the damn thing. Nate felt like a superhero as he curled the 100 with relative ease, switching to his left arm once his right one became fatigued. Hot damn, he could only imagine what his bench or squat looked like now. A thought came to Nate as his eyes found the Olympic bars by the squat rack. A very tantalizing thought indeed, but he'd saved that for toward the end of his workout. He felt great as he went through the motions. He was building a sweat and blowing off some steam. God, it felt so good to feel his muscles scream without putting his neck on the line for once. Sure, he had to put all the weights on max to get any kind of burn, but that only filled him with euphoria. To others, it was a necessary ordeal to get in shape, but to Nate, exercising was nirvana. It held back all the unspeakable horrors in the world and let him be himself, just him, and this heavy-ass weight that he did want to lift. Eventually, though, in the middle of his workout, he began to notice a gathering crowd. He'd been so damn distracted, he hadn't even noticed the other people coming in. Nate put down his weights gently, wiping the sweat from his brow with a towel as he approached to see what the fuss was all about. The hell is going on? Nate was stunned into silence as he realized what was happening. Dan was facing off against Clyde, but not in a fight. Dan's thick arms bulged as he gripped the barbell, the veins in his neck standing out like ropes. Across from him, Clyde's face remained serene, almost priest-like in its calm focus, even as sweat beaded on his shaved head. The crowd watched on, amazed as the 2 burly men were facing off in a deadlift match. Dan roared as he lifted the weight off the ground, dragging it up his shins with a grimace. Nate gasped upon seeing the weight. Over 1,000 pounds. That was close to the official world record for the deadlift, a feat of strength Nate himself had never dreamed of accomplishing, yet here Dan was, drawing close to that limit and not looking too strained while doing so. Dan held the menacing weight at the top, a wide grin on his face as he stared at Clyde, who merely crossed his arms. "Amateur," Clyde snorted with a chuckle, approaching as Dan lowered the weight. Clyde was normally calm and reserved, but this was the man's whole career. He was a professional powerlifter on the side, and a strong one at that, close to setting a few world records himself. With a smirk, Clyde began piling more weight onto the bar. "Don't know if this thing can even handle this weight, but we'll damn well see." "You've got to be shitting me." Nate's heart sank as he saw Clyde begin to pile on the plates. The cleric didn't stop until he reached over 1,200 pounds in weight, which was over the world record for the deadlift by around 90 pounds. Are you crazy?" Dan muttered as he gawked at the monstrosity. Who could blame him? Clyde smiled in response. He clapped his hands after applying some chalk, the dust puffing around his face. Clyde then took a few deep breaths before stretching, a grim look of determination on his face. Once his routine was done, Clyde fixed his stance and placed his hands on the barbell. Clyde then let out a powerful roar as he lifted the iron monstrosity, dragging it up his shins before locking it out at his hips. His face was a deep shade of red, veins bulging as he held the weight. Clyde had just broken the damn world record, but much to his horror, Clyde wasn't done. the glow of his own healing magic enwrapping him before he pulled the bar up to the top of his generous stomach. "Clyde, stop!" Nate yelled as both sides of the bar bent downward. He struggled when it reached his chest, face red and almost toppling over the veins, looking about, ready to pop out of his bald head. But with grit, Clyde pushed through and raised the barbell straight over his head. The glow of healing magic intensified as he kept the bar high over his head, a look of ecstatic joy on Clyde's face. He'd just set a record the world would have never seen before all this happened. Nate found himself wondering just how much Eddie Ball or Fulthor Bjornsson could lift now with the system in place, assuming they were still alive anyway. The records of the past were nothing compared to the records that could be set now. There were no shouts, no screams of victory or hollering out of pride. Clyde, with full control of the weight, slowly lowered the barbell, placing it on the ground with a smirk. "Someone owes me a victory meal, tattoo boy." Dan groaned in response, but didn't deny it. "You're a damn cleric, don't make any damn sense." Dan pointed. "That's why I could do it, chump." Clyde flexed, healed the damage as I went. "That has got to be cheating." Dan crossed his arms. The two then began to bicker back and forth as Nate stared down at the Olympic bar. He winced as he saw that the handle stayed curved upward. Seemed that one was damn broken now. He'd been wanting to see how much he could deadlift too, but there were other bars in here he could use for that as well. "I guess the monkey show's over," Nate heard from his left. When he turned, he saw Ben holding a sketchbook, lazily staring at the two. "You draw?" Nate asked in amazement. He never saw Ben doing something artistic before. Ben grinned. "Just catching up on old hobbies. Haven't drawn since high school. Wanna see?" Nate curiously peeked at the sketchbook and saw an impressive sketch of two apes in tutus holding ridiculous weights over each other's heads while being watched by a crowd of monkeys. Ben snickered. "I call it Gym of the Apes." Nate had to admit it was impressive work if Ben was as rusty as he says he is. He was about to give high praise until he noticed an oversized monkey with really long hair in the back of the crowd. He could have excused it if it weren't wearing a familiar belt with a horned skull. Nate took a sharp breath before wrapping an arm around Ben's shoulders. "Wonderful work, man. Hey, why don't we show it to Dan and Clyde?" Ben's eyes turned to saucers. "Hey man, it was just a joke, no need to go all George about it." "All George?" Nate asked, offended. "Benothi," he said flatly. "Don't call me Benothi, jackass." He shook his head. "Not cool, dude." "Sorry, Ben baby," Nate replied with a shrug, quickly following up before the man could reply. "Did you get that phone working yet?" Ben glared but shook his head. "Nah, I'm sure someone can help me out with it eventually, but I'm out of my element with this tech shit." "Same," Nate said. "Sorry I busted the last one." Ben waved a dismissive hand. "It's all good, man. We squashed that beef already." "I know, but butts are for pooping." Ben pointed. "Get out of here, nerd." "All right, fat ass," Nate replied with no real heat in his voice, heading toward Clyde. "I'm the skinniest dude here." Ben huffed. "You're fat in the head," Nate shot back. "And you're fucked in the head," Ben said quickly as Nate left him behind. Nate then brought up his status screen as he drew closer to Clyde, who had his hands on his hips as he stared down at the bent weight. Status, name, Nathan J. Greaves. Class, Barbarian/Bard. Level 4, 2+2. Strength, 18+2. Constitution, 19+1. Agility, 11. Dexterity, 16. Intelligence, 9+2. Wisdom, 10. Charisma, Chetrapad Smith. Luck, 3. Skills, guitar play, 7. Bucketmeister, 3. Fisticuffs, 5. Axe, 5. Mace, 3. Abilities, enhancing melody, 1. Drowsy gents, 1. Soothing songs, 2. Aggravating tunes, 2. Rage, 2. Battle cry, 1. Leap, 1. Blood lightning, 1. Resistances, poison, 1. He then closed the screen. "Hey, Clyde," Nate asked him, "what's your strength score right now?" Clyde smirked with pride. 16, but hey, don't feel discouraged, buddy. You'll get up to that in no time, I'm sure." Nate stared in shock, which Clyde must have misinterpreted, for that prideful smirk deepened. Nate was 4 points stronger than Clyde. He looked down at his calloused hands. wondering just how much weight he could press over his head if he really tried. Thing was that Clyde had managed to do that feat of strength thanks to his healing magic, though Nate didn't have that. So could he manage the same? "Clyde, I'm going to need you to heal me if I get hurt doing this," Nate said, approaching the bent bar. "Nate, come on, pal." He shook his head. "Are you going to try and do what I did?" "Sure am." Nate grinned, gripping the bar tightly. A heavy silence flooded the gym as everyone began to gather around Nate, clearly eager to see if he could lift the same weight. He stood still for a moment, inhaling deeply, mentally preparing himself for the challenge ahead. Before him lay the barbell, its metal slightly warped from the earlier punishment Clyde had put it through, punishment that Nate desired to repeat. But he was ready. He could handle this. He was 4 points stronger than Clyde, and while he didn't have the technical knowledge or the healing magic Clyde possessed, he felt certain he could do this. Nate let out a deep, guttural grunt as he bent down, gripping the cold, rough steel with determination. He winced as the bar scraped up his shins as he hauled it upward, muscles tensing and veins popping with exertion. With a firm motion, he locked the bar out at his hips, pausing briefly before mustering his strength to heave it up to his chest. With a primal roar that echoed through the room, Nate thrust the barbell over his head, muscles straining against the weight. His heart thundered in his chest, adrenaline coursing through his veins like liquid fire. He held the weight triumphantly above him, knowing he had finally surpassed Clyde, something he'd never thought he'd be able to do. Clyde goggled at him with clear shock as Nate put down the weight, suddenly feeling dizzy as he dropped down to one knee. He heard concerned shouts from around him, but all Nate could think about was how much more weight he could push. Had he had, rage activated. Chapter 20. Another Stranger Me. "Fucking bugs," Nate slapped at his neck, flicking away the crushed remains of yet another mosquito. The insect's damn needle nose hadn't even pierced his skin, as if it had struck metal instead of flesh. Having a high constitution was damn awesome. Just because his skin was immune to bug bites, though, didn't mean that the mosquitoes knew that. The damn things wouldn't leave him the hell alone. He'd counted 8 mosquitoes that had tried their luck today for some sweet Nate nectar and had lost their lives in the attempt to drink him. "Ah, fucking bugs!" screamed Ben. Nate had almost thought Ben was mocking him till he saw the redhead rubbing a giant bump on his arm. The bite was already turning swollen and red. "Why did we decide to go here again?" he complained, rolling down his sleeves despite the heat. One of Clarissa's people, Joel, snorted. "To get some quests done. All of us have quests related to the Elven Forest, so better finish them while we're here." The man was an oddity, albeit a positive one. Joel had shared his last energy bar with Ben after the guy had run out, without even being asked. The guy even laughed at a terrible pun Nate had made involving the quest log, not the polite chuckle most people gave, but a genuine laugh that crinkled the corners of his eyes. He wasn't sure how strong Joel was yet and what makes monks different from fighters and barbarians. But something in Nate's gut said that he shouldn't underestimate him. "We could have just killed some goblins instead, or zombies," Ben grumbled before ducking under a crooked branch. Joel shook his head. "Not an option. Everyone's sick of the undead, and their quests don't give much experience. Meanwhile, the wild pigs hogged all of the greens." He grinned, a glint in his eye. Nate rolled his eyes at the terrible pun, suppressing a smile. He could almost swear that his belt rolled its hollow eyes too. The thing might be a handful, but he slowly started to think of it like a pet dog, a magical dog that lets him shoot red lightning, but still a dog. Speaking of magic, Nate turned his attention to Aerith, the shadowy figure enjoying herself watching Clyde console Dan. Nate couldn't understand what kind of fun she could derive out of Clyde and the tattooed sad sack, but he was sure that it wouldn't take long. Clyde patted a sulking Dan on the back. "Come on, man, let it go already." Dan clicked his tongue and looked away, his jaw clenched tight enough that a small muscle twitched beneath the stubble on his cheek. "It's just not fair," he muttered, slapping viciously at a mosquito that landed on his forearm, leaving a smear of blood across his sun-reddened skin. "What gives Nate the right to steal our thunder like that? We're both a higher level than he is, so what the hell?" "Think of it this way. He's just an obstacle we'll need to surpass. No, we will overcome him. He won't keep that record for long. We've got it in the bag. Clyde gave a thumbs up. That world record will be mine, he said with determination. Dan gave a nod with a new fire in his eyes. Nate looked away before Dan could catch him staring and turned his attention to his surroundings. He took a deep breath of fresh air and smiled. After all, he was in a forest bursting with life, not a half-destroyed, zombie-infested town. Nate's shoulders relaxed as pine needles crunched beneath his boots. Sunlight dappled through branches overhead, casting shifting patterns on a carpet of clover and wildflowers. A chipmunk darted across their path, freezing momentarily before scurrying up a massive trunk. Above them, 3 grey squirrels paused their gathering, twitching their tails as they peered down at the intruders with black button eyes. Somewhere nearby, a woodpecker's rapid drumming echoed through the trees. Even though this forest wasn't supposed to be here, it felt damn good to be out in nature for a change. Even before the world pile, Nate hadn't gone out to the forest in years. It would be really relaxing, were it not for the mosquitoes. Every time they passed beneath shaded parts of the woods, the little bastards would come out in droves. Nate had heard that mosquitoes stick to nighttime and the shadows because the sun dehydrates them or something, little vampire freaks. After a bit more hiking, the small group reached a stream swarming with fish. Ereth hanging back as usual, just observing. Nate told the rest that they could relax before bending down to check if the water was safe, gesturing for Clyde to approach. From all of the fish, it's likely safe, but it was better to be safe than sorry. Nathan brought an empty bottle out of his bag and proceeded to fill it up with water, with only a simple cloth acting as a filter. He knew that the cloth wasn't effective on its own, but anything was better than nothing. If they'd brought a pot, then they could have boiled the water too, but they hadn't thought that far ahead. Ah well, it'd probably be fine. Once the bottle was half full, he brought it close to his lips and stopped. Did he really want to test the water himself? It was water from a place called the Elven Forest. He was curious for sure and expected to get sick from it. But what if it turned him to a fish instead? Hey! With a sigh, Nate held the bottle and muttered, well, pinkies down and bottoms up, or whatever they say. He gripped the plastic bottle with a determined hand, tipping it back as though it were a shot glass, and gulped down the cool water in rapid swallows. His eyes widened as each mouthful rushed to quench his thirst. It was crisp and fresh. Nate could argue that it was the best water he ever drank in his life, but then he remembered the risks. It might not be the best water in the world if it gave him syphilades or some shit. He lowered the bottle and turned to Clyde, and the man gave a nod before his hand started to glow. Clyde held his hand out toward Nate, his fingertips expelling faint blue wispy trails that reminded Nate of dry ice vapor. The vapor trails moved toward Nate, enwrapping him and sending a chill down his spine. It felt as if the temperature had dropped by several degrees, goosebumps prickling across Nate's arms. It felt like minty icy hot was spreading through Nate's veins, sharp, clean, and slightly numbing. Doesn't feel like I cured anything, Clyde shrugged. Guess that means we're in the clear, bud. That's all Nate and the others needed to hear. They quickly gathered around the clear, bubbling stream, eagerly unscrewing the caps of their water bottles. The sun glinted off the water as Nate and his friends crouched down, submerging their bottles into the cool, refreshing water. Meanwhile, Dan knelt at the stream's edge, leaned forward and plunged his head straight into the water, no doubt relishing the icy rush against his face. He gasped as he removed his head again before plunging it in once more, bubbles rising from either side of his bald head. Careful now, no need to swallow a fish. Clyde warned him as Dan rose his head from the stream like some kind of wildebeest. Just cooling off, man. It's hella hot, Dan argued, and Nate had to agree. Sweat trickled down Nate's neck, gathering where his hair clung to his skin in dark, heavy ropes. He pushed the damp strands back, wincing as they immediately slapped against his shoulders again. The forest's thick air clung to him like a second shirt, the mugginess intensifying the heat he felt. Without another word, he dropped to his knees beside Dan, his lips curling into a wide grin before he plunged face first into the stream's embrace, feeling the shocking cold race across his scalp. He relished the cool water rushing through his hair, washing away the heat and sweat, both as the torrents passed him by. After a moment, he pulled his head free from the water, whipping his hair backward with a gasp. Clyde sighed. Really? You too? Nate offered a nonchalant shrug. He contemplated spending an hour or so quietly fishing before making his way back, but thought better of it. They shouldn't linger for too long, besides they didn't even bring fishing rods, and he wasn't sure he could even catch any of these fish bare-handed. Best to get the exploration quest over with as quickly as possible. As Nate made up his mind, he noticed something shaking some bushes in the distance. Nate tightened his grip around his guitar axe, drawing it while forming the horns in his other hand. Nate stared intensely, the others falling silent as they all assumed formation. Is that a deer? Ben asked. A flash of tawny fur and white tail disappeared between the pines, hooves kicking up pine needles that spiraled in its wake. The crack of a snapped branch echoed through the trees, followed by the fading thump-thump-thump of its retreat. Way to go, Ben. You made our dinner run away. Dan complained, a deep frown on his face. Ben stared at Dan incredulously. You want to kill it. Why? Dan crossed his arms. Protein, he said flatly, licking his lips as he stared after the thing. Nate and Clyde then gave one another a knowing glance, before they nodded. Protein, they both said in unison. If we see it again, I'll zap it with my lightning. Nate said, I could use some venison. Amen to that, Joel chimed in. Dan gave a devilish grin. Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys, he declared, pitching his voice lower. Jess, who had been quiet for the most part, spoke up. We shouldn't just kill it for food. They turned to the diminutive woman. I gotta eat something with real meat to it. Nate told her, we're in the woods and humans are predators, so let's predate, or whatever it's called. You mean hunt, dumbass, Dan scoffed. No, I meant cunt, like what you are. Nate pointed. Language, Jess complained, covering her ears. Dios mio, did your mothers not teach you any better? My mum taught me everything I know. Nate shrugged. She did say to use that one on special occasions, though. Jess shook her head with a scoff. Ben, you can't be really considering. The man merely sighed. We're going to need some actual meat at the station. Kids can't grow up eating granola bars and dried fruit. I say we go for it. Jess opened her mouth but closed it again, apparently unable to come up with another argument. After a moment, she sighed. Fine, but don't expect me to help do this. I'll just follow along, Jess told them. You can spend time with me then, Aerith said, her shadowy figure emerging right beside her. The brown-eyed woman let out a small squeak of terror, Aerith's floating red eyes turning up mischievously. Relax, I don't bite. Or at least not yet. She laughed. Nate brought up his side quest screen, seeing that he had indeed fulfilled the Elven Forest exploration quest. But a new evil one had appeared in its place. Side quests. Entertain over 100 people with soothing songs. Reward, Simps XP, kill 25 goblins solo. Reward, 100 experience points, kill a wood spawn. Reward, Simps XP, sway an elf with music. Reward, Simps XP, discover a rune of power. Reward, Simps XP, greater than encounter and survive an entity more than 5 levels higher than you. Reward, 500 experience points, breach the spire. Reward, 1,000 experience points, strangle Sam to death. Reward, 2,000 experience points, leave Dan to die. Reward, 2,000 experience points, kill Tom before he kills you. Reward, 2,000 experience points, eat Jess's flesh. Reward, 2,000 experience points. He sneered. Never. Nate scowled, jaw clenching. What's up, Nate? Dan asked, furrowing his brow. Nothing, he said, closing his screen. Let's go get that meal. With a quick glance at each other, they broke into a jog, moving toward the dense thicket where the animal had darted away. Uncertainty gnawed at him as they pressed on, lacking any clear sense of its path. His eyes focused intently on the soft, damp earth, searching for the series of hoofprints and broken twigs that would guide them through the tangled underbrush. All right, let's look at them tracks and take our time, Joel said. We're persistence predators. We'll tire it out as we go. No need for all this damn running. They then approached the tracks, Nate crouching down, tracing his finger along the indentation in the soft earth. 4 distinct hoofprints pressed into the dirt, each one a perfect crescent moon. Then another, slightly offset, deeper than the others. He glanced up at Dan, who was already shaking his head. Clyde's hand drifted to his weapon. Behind them, Jess whispered something to Ben, her eyes darting between the tracks and the shadowy spaces between the trees. "What the hell? It got a 5th leg?" he asked. "Not sure if I want to eat it now." "Then let's go," Jess insisted. "This isn't right." Nate's ears picked up on a sudden, intense silence as they had passed deeper into the woods. The squirrels that had been chattering overhead minutes before had vanished. No more rustling in the underbrush where rabbits had darted. Even the birds had stopped their calls mid-song, leaving everything eerily quiet. His skin prickled as the forest held its breath around them, leaving only the oblivious gurgle of the stream, suddenly too loud in the vacuum of sound. He gulped. Let's just get the hell out of here," he told them, turning back to the stream. "Yeah," Dan said after a moment, the group backing away from the trail. He could hear every breath, every crunch of the forest floor beneath his feet. "Guys," Ben cried. "Guys, where did you go?" Nate looked to Ben, who was standing just behind him, the opposite direction the voice had come from. A shudder went up his spine as he remembered old horror stories he'd read as a kid, of familiar voices calling out from the woods, beckoning people to their deaths. "Nate, I'm hurt, man," Ben's voice cried out again, though the man's mouth didn't move at all. Ben shook his head, backing away from the trail. "We need to get the fuck out of here now." A primal terror nearly forced Nate to dart out of the forest right then and there as Ben's cries intensified, drawing closer, sounding like it was just behind one of the nearby trees. "Dan," the doppelganger cried out, "that's not me, it's a fake." Dan's gaze snapped to Ben, his eyes wide with alarm. Ben's head moved in a rapid, adamant shake, a clear signal. As they all retreated cautiously, Jess moved closer to Joel, her hands clutching tightly to his arm. Nate fixed his gaze on the towering tree, his muscles tensed and ready to spring into action the moment whatever ominous presence lurked behind it revealed itself. "Nate, please," the fake Ben cried out. "Go fuck yourself, freak," Nate shouted back. "No dinner for you." If that was really Ben, then it wouldn't be staying out of sight. He would have noticed if Ben had gone missing, but everyone had an eye on one another during this whole trip. This thing, whatever it was, couldn't possibly be the real Ben, even if it sounded exactly like him. The thought of it froze him in place a moment, hands tightening on the axe. What the hell was he doing, running away from this damn thing? "What the fuck are you doing, man?" Ben cried. "This thing's gonna eat us." "I think it can't," Nate said resolutely, the primal fear he felt trickling away. "If it was strong enough too, then it would have come after us already. It's gonna try to pick us out one by one." He glared at the tree. "I say we jump it." "I'm not getting anywhere near that thing." Ben shook his head. "It sounds like me, man. Hell no. I've got friends on the res tell me about this kind of thing, and this is bad shit. Let's just fucking go, please." "Pussy-ass bitch," Dan mocked the thing. "You gonna do anything besides play and pretend?" "Dan," Ben began. "Biggest bitch cryptid in the forest." Nate joined in. "Bro, bring Bigfoot. That's way cooler than you." "Bring me one of Santa's elves," Joel joined with a nervous laugh. Aerith laughed toward the back of the group. "You are all hilarious. I do hope to meet you all in the flesh soon. This seems like good fun." The false Ben fell silent before something huge emerged from behind the thick trunk of the tree. It was a towering figure, its presence casting an ominous shadow across the forest floor. This creature, with the head of a deer, possessed a fanged mouth from which frothing saliva dripped incessantly, pooling onto the ground in a slick, glistening puddle. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, it was an imposing sight, its broad arms covered in dense fur that ended in clawed hands, sharp and ready to rend. The creature's antlers were a macabre spectacle, stained with blood and torn strips of freshly ripped velvet, hanging like tattered banners. Its hooved feet were massive and appeared capable of shattering wood with the slightest effort, each step a testament to its raw, unrestrained power. It stared directly into Nate's eyes before its putrid mouth twisted up in a smile. "False witness is done." Barry's voice rang out from its mouth, a deep, gravelly voice. "I can't work with a dickhead like you, Nate. We're all sick of your shit." Nate's skin went cold at the words, eyes going wide as the beast had just voiced an old memory of his. How was that possible? How did it know what Barry sounded like, or even what he'd said to Nate that day? The day False Witness broke up. He grit his teeth, it didn't matter. He was going to cut this thing to ribbons for reminding him of that day. Terror left him as he darted forward with an animalistic snarl. "Get ready to die, bitch!" Nate screamed. Rage.